Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. This evening, we have no regrets, although we do have a member, Pavan Parmer, who is on maternity leave and the proud mother of a recently born beautiful baby girl. And we wish mother and father and family all the best. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, there are none. Council, you have your standing committee reports in front of you. We need a mover and seconder for approval of the recommendation of the 2020 Budget Committee meeting of July 9th. Councillor Adams and Councillor Grant, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, everybody. We now need a motion, a mover and a seconder to resolve in the committee of the whole for the planning discussions, and that's Councillor Lischina and Councillor Duddock. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, everybody. Council, as a nod to the outstanding interest in item number 9, I think it would be a good thing to move item 9 up to first place on the agenda. And unless one of the members of council needs a presentation, the presentation from staff would just be a synopsis of the report that you've already read. I will recognize Councillor O'Meara. Councillor O'Meara has a motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to firstly thank staff for all the work they've done, and also for the Acclaim Health team on working with us in the manner with which they have. I know there are some outstanding issues that are being resolved, and we're in a bit of a timeline here. So with that, what I would propose is a motion that I believe my council colleagues have in front of them. I'll read it out here. That the recommendation report, zoning bylaw amendment, Acclaim Health and Community Care Services, 2250 Spears Road, dated July 26, 2019, be received, and that planning staff be directed to bring forward a report in September 2019 that would allow council to consider a temporary use bylaw permitting the proposed dementia care facility at 2250 Spears Road.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, Council, we have registered delegations, and it's my intention to poll the delegations to see if any wish to still make a presentation. And I want to explain, for the benefit of anyone who might be confused by the motion to receive. A motion to receive, the recommendation was to turn down the application. A motion to receive is a motion to file the report, and the rest of the motion, which is to ask staff to bring back a temporary use bylaw, is a indication of where council would like to go with the matter, instead of rejecting the recommendation, or I'm sorry, the application. So, Madam Clerk, would you call the first delegation?
First delegation is Chad Murray.
Mr. Murray, did you still want to present? Mr. Murray, you seem to be a quick study. Councillor Adams, I'll come to you after I've done with the delegations. The next delegation?
Next delegation is Jane Kennedy.
Ms. Kennedy? So I'd ask you the same question. So the question is, given the recommendation that the councillor has made, do you still wish to make your delegation?
No, I don't need to.
Thank you. Another quick study. Madam Clerk?
The last listed delegation is Emma West.
Ms. West?
I can defer my delegation until September. That's more appropriate.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Adams?
Mike, it was actually a question for our staff with respect to the concept of a temporary use bylaw. I wonder if our staff would be able to provide some information right now about what a temporary use bylaw enables and how it may or may not apply in a situation like this, so that those who are in attendance today can understand what's likely to be brought forward in September.
Mr. Planning Director.
Thank you, Your Worship. To the councillor, so temporary use bylaw is permitted under the Planning Act, and this will allow, if approved, would allow council to allow the authorized use of land, building, or structure for a period of up to 3 years. And in that time frame, it could be re-renewed. I'll think of the Vic Hadfield Golf Course. You're familiar with that one in North Oakville. It's been approved, I'm going to say, more than my time here anyway, a lot of years. And so it gives council an opportunity to look at certain issues and resolve them, and also for other planning matters to advance at town locally. For example, we're doing the Bronte Area Growth Review, and this would position certain policy structures in place during the temporary use bylaw period, which may allow this to move forward on a more permanent basis.
Thank you, that's perfect.
Thank you, Mr. Planning Director. If there's no other questions or comments, Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick question. If this report is received and it goes back for further refinement with respect to the process, what's the timing on that? Because I understand a claim has been doing their due diligence, and I think they're ready.
Through your worship to the councillor. So we've been in dialogue with Ms. West, who's a representative or agent for a claim, over the last several weeks. There's some additional work that needs to be done with respect to the provincial D6 guidelines as it relates to air quality and noise. And I understand that work's underway, and we expect it to arrive within the time frame of our agenda sign-off for the next council meeting, or P&D Council in September.
Thank you.
So shall I put the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you very much, everybody. Now, we have a... We have a rich and exciting agenda ahead of us, and if you'd like to stay for it, we will be glad to have the company. But just in case some of you would like to leave, I'll declare a 2-minute recess so that your leaving won't disturb the rest of the meeting.
I love the hat.
I'll call the meeting back to order now. And council, the first item, or the next item before us, is the consent item, and that's the recommendation from staff from the legal department that we received their report and not express interest in the surplus lands of the Halton District School site on Nautical Boulevard. We need a mover for that. Councillor Robertson. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Next item is the confidential consent item, C1, on the LPAT hearing for Martelac Estates and Graydon Banning. And you have a recommendation from the staff, and I'm looking for a motion. Councillor Elgar?
Yeah, Mayor, I would like to go in camera at the end of the meeting on this item, please.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
So we're going to defer this and slip it to the end of the meeting. And the next item is the confidential item C2, the Uptown Core Roads and Parkland. And the motion, we need a mover for this one. Councillor Knoll is moving the motion. All those in favor? And that's carried. And the motion is that staff be authorized to proceed as set out in the confidential report from the legal department dated July 26th and the confidential memorandum from the legal department dated August 2nd. And that brings us to our first public hearing item, which is the public meeting report for the zoning amendment and draft plan of subdivision at 157 Cross Avenue. And here we do have a presentation from Heinz Heck, the manager of current planning. And because this is a matter of some public interest, I recommend that we receive this presentation for the benefit of the public. Mr. Heck, we look forward to your report and your presentation.
Item 2 is a public meeting report regarding a proposed zoning amendment and draft plan of subdivision application, which is submitted by Can China Real Capital Incorp. The purpose of the staff report is to provide an overview of the proposed development in the context of the town's official plan and applicable policies, and to obtain council and public input. The effect of the proposal would be to permit the development of a 26-story and 12-story mixed-use building containing 252 residential units, 289 square meters of retail, and 580 square meters of office gross floor area. The following slide provides an overview of the Midtown Oakville development approvals, which have received council approval over the last several years. The developments located east of Trafalgar Road are office uses which have been constructed. The developments located west of Trafalgar Road are residential in nature and have been approved subject to a holding provision which require transportation and infrastructure servicing to be in place. The proposal which is before council tonight, the lands are approximately 0.4 hectares in area and are located on the north side of Cross Avenue, immediately north of the GO Transit parking area. The property has 33 meters of frontage on Cross Avenue and a depth of approximately 130 meters. Driveway access is proposed from Cross Avenue via shared access with the adjacent property to the east. Access to the 5 levels of underground parking is located to the north of the property, and future driveway access would also be available from the east-west public road at such time the road is constructed. This slide shows the proposal in the context of the future local roads, road network within Midtown. Staff note that the Midtown local roads were incorporated into the official plan via Official Plan Amendment 14, which was approved by Council in September of 2017, and based upon the approved Midtown environmental assessment. In terms of the official plan, the lands are located within Midtown Oakville and are identified as an urban growth center. The southerly portion of the property, adjacent to Cross Avenue, is designated urban center, which would permit building heights of up to 12 stories. And the northerly portion is designated urban core, which would permit building heights up to 20 stories. The lands are also eligible for bonusing, in this case 6 stories for the northern portion of the building. And as noted in the staff report, it's expected that the Section 37 provision of the Planning Act will be replaced with a new community benefit charge upon proclamation of, by the province of Bill 108. Staff note that the Planning Act modifications to Bill 108 as it relates to the community benefit charge have not come into force. The proposed development also provides an opportunity to obtain the conveyance of a portion of the future local road along the northern perimeter of the property, as noted in the official plan. In terms of zoning, the lands are currently zoned MTC Midtown Transitional Commercial. A zoning amendment would be required to implement the proposal. The staff report provides an overview of the issues which have been identified to date. These include coordination of the proposed development with the adjacent lands to the east in terms of access, internal circulation, and separation distances between buildings. The appropriateness of the proposed Cross Avenue driveway access, which is currently shared. Confirmation of adequate transportation and servicing infrastructure. And Bill 108 implications on the ability to utilize the bonusing provisions of the official plan. In conclusion, Your Worship, that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council, it's your turn to ask questions. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. Just to confirm, is it 252 units or 255 residential units? Because in the key facts at the beginning, it says it's 255 residential units.
Through your worship, I apologize, that was a typo, and it's actually 252.
So it is 252.
Yeah.
So now if we move on to the parking. In a report further on, we talk about average number of vehicles per household in Oakville is 1.9. And yet if we go with what they are proposing, we're coming up with a 0.67 cars per residential unit, excluding the visitor parking. Does that seem reasonable, and can you logically think that that could work at all, anywhere in Oakville?
Through you, your worship, the chart on page 18 does provide an overview of what the parking standard is proposed in comparison to what the Midtown Strategy parking standard recommends and what the current bylaw recommends. So the proposed parking is currently 0.9 spaces per unit, which includes the visitor. That would generate a total of 171 spaces for the tenants and 57 visitor parking spaces, for a total of 228 parking spaces, and 20 parking spaces for commercial uses. So a total of 248 parking spaces on the property, all inclusive. The Midtown Strategy, which was developed in conjunction with the Midtown objectives of the official plan, had recommended a parking standard of 1.15 spaces per unit, recognizing the location of the area in proximity to the GO station and the ability to take advantage of the commuter traffic that would be logically used in that manner, would establish a parking of 290 spaces all in, 290 for the residential and an additional 24 for the commercial. So the applicant is proposing a lesser standard, but that is one of the issues that we have identified as well as part of our analysis.
So it will be coming back as a major issue, I would think. It looks like trying to put 10 pounds of something in a 5-pound bag. Like when you start looking at a 0.67, especially when the average in Oakville is 1.9 vehicles per housing unit. Okay. When you look at the commercial, 20 spaces, that's all there is. So you got 6,200 square feet of office space and 3,110 square feet of retail space. So if anybody comes there, like there's got to be some workers there too, and unless they have a house with a job that live there, they're going to have to drive to work also.
Through you, your worship, that standard is consistent with the standard that council recently approved for 393 Dundas Street West, in terms of the parking standards. So
Now, and we are asking for a report coming back on parking, right? And it's coming back this fall?
that's correct. Yes.
Will it come back before this comes back?
That,
There is another, through you, Mr. Mayor, there is another item on the agenda on the parking management report.
Yes.
That is identifying the issues that we'll look at, and we'll come back in September with the terms of reference. The conclusions of the terms of reference will be later, so I would assume that this application, given its time frame to be dealt with, would be dealt with council before the conclusion of the parking report comes back.
Okay, that's too bad. Next, I have, where you talk about a strong urban street edge. Can you explain what a strong urban street edge is and what the definition would be for that? It's on the picture of the bottom of page 19.
through you, your worship, the application and the design will be subject to an urban design review and considered in conjunction with the urban design guidelines for Midtown. Typically, the development in these areas are highly compact, zero setbacks, and so on. So it's, buildings being brought up to the street edge create that strong urban edge, which I believe you're referring to. I know the applicant is here tonight and is prepared to make a presentation on their application, and you may want to have a few questions with them on that.
Okay, but what we mean by strong urban street edge is cement to the zero lot line for the building to go straight up. That's the idea?
That would be part of it, the massing and scale, close to the street frontage, retail, sidewalks, that type of animation and interaction would be all part of that
So
as well.
when we talk bonusing, plus 6 stories, potentially, what about parking? Would that all comes into it at a different time?
To you, your worship, yes, parking would come into play as well. It would be based upon the units in the building, both bonused and non-bonused.
Okay. I thank you. Now, on the proposed parking, it just says 171 spaces. If you look back on page 18, it says 202 tenant spaces. Is it just the word tenant missing there? I get concerned about words on anything going forward with the planning and development. That we make sure, you mean to say 171 tenant spaces there?
Yes.
And the reason I ask is I'm concerned that maybe you may have retail or office starting to use this space also, if it doesn't specifically say tenant.
That would be the intent. The 171 spaces would be for the tenants.
It's for tenant,
yeah.
okay, because I noticed it's on the first 2 cells, but not on the last one. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much.
Councillor Giddings.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Question regarding, we've got item number 7 coming up, Bill 108, More Homes, More Choices. So you mentioned the cash in lieu and a couple of other things. I take it we aren't going to find out what is possible on this property or any of Midtown until those changes are implemented?
Through you, your worship. Yes, we're still waiting for more regulations from the province that will help guide us in terms of the future community benefit charge and bonusing provisions and so on.
In terms of our vision for Midtown, is this the type of building, the type of project that we anticipated when the plans were put in place?
Yes, as far as the built form, the density, certainly in an urban growth center, that's where you want your density to be located. Adjacent to a major transit center, those would be ideal locations for this type of building form.
Received a notice the other day from Metrolinx looking for feedback on mobility hubs on the GO system. Would that have any effect on this? Is there any inkling of proposed revisions or changes? We're moving fairly quickly on this, and I'm just curious if there's anything that you've heard.
It's something that we'll be looking at as well. I believe the intent of that review is to look at opportunities for accessibility and improving pedestrian passage through their system and so on. So certainly it would apply here as well. But as far as affecting the application itself, not likely to.
So is the 2 main reasons for the H or the hold on it is the infrastructure being wastewater allocation from the region, as well as the road network, the realigning of cross, bridges, flyovers, the whole Trafalgar, lower Trafalgar, Cornwall area?
Yes, there certainly will be a holding provision established, which we have not resolved yet in terms of all the matters that would be looked at, but certainly transportation infrastructure, servicing infrastructure are standard candidates for holding provisions. There may be a record of site condition here as well. There's also, as part of the application, a draft plan of subdivision. There'll be an opportunity for conditions of approval to be established, which will deal with the sequencing of the development and so on. So we're not there yet, but those are the tools that I think we'll be using next time we come back to council.
All right, I appreciate that. And last question, further to Councillor Elgar's query regarding parking. There must be enough development along the goal lines now that would be able to look at other communities to see, I think we're going to see a smaller request for parking. I can see people like my kids living in these buildings, hopping on the GO train and maybe having a zip car in the basement or some sort of ride sharing. Will there be enough information out there from other developments similar to this to see whether it's 0.67 or 1.15 or whatever?
Certainly, there's an opportunity to look at what other municipalities are doing in the same similar circumstances, developments adjacent to transit corridors and so on, which we have done already to a certain extent. But certainly, there's an opportunity to do that and revisit that as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Your Worship, through. I have a concern with respect to the development and the timing, and I know it's one of the things to look at, the alignment of future east-west local roads and timing of construction. That's a real concern right now, because Cross Avenue, if you look at it, you have the GO station there where everything is dropped off, buses, cars. It's really congested at times, and you've got traffic congestion at Trafalgar Road and Cross Avenues and times. By putting this development in is adding to, and I'm not convinced that, you know, in the future we're looking at having compact development around transportation nodes. Understand that, get out of your residence and right into transit. But I think the car is going to be here for a while. I don't think it's going to happen automatically within a 10-year period. So what my concern is, we're adding to the existing roadways network, and it's going to be really frustrating. So the timing, to me, are we looking at doing any construction on roadways with the Midtown Strategy Report with respect to the alignment of roadways? Would they be done before that, or are they going to be done after the construction?
Through you, Your Worship, certainly, as we had mentioned, the holding provision will include a requirement that transportation infrastructure be in place to accommodate this development. In terms of what roadworks are going to be required to allow this development to get off the ground as opposed to other developments is something that we may not know at this point in time. But it's certainly something that we would need to get a handle on before we're in a position to move forward with the application. In addition to just the transportation network, there's also servicing infrastructure as well, and the two really go, you know, hand in glove on that. And so, looking at all those elements in a way that allows us to make decisions on applications is something that we'll be doing.
I guess in just an analysis, is form follows function. You need the functions in place first before the form comes, and that's all I'm thinking. It's kind of reversed here. That's the only concern I have. Thank you very much.
Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So just for clarity, for those that are listening and for my own peace of mind, this development, if it was to receive a hold, may not be built for an extensive period of time until the road network, the wastewater is in place, and we figured out how we're going to move traffic in that area. Do I have that clear?
Yes, you do.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sandu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on top of Councillor Elgar's comments before, I'm hoping you can walk me through the consistency with 393 Dundas. So my understanding is that North Oakville is on a transit first plan. This area, although close to the transit corridor, to me doesn't seem like it would be transit first. And the only reason why I say that is the high amount of visibility that commercial properties would have in that area would be a huge boon to them. So my assumption is that they would also have additional traffic in comparison to the smaller mom and pops that we have in the preserve and other areas in North Oakville. So my concern is more about the parking from a commercial perspective, because people are going to come from all over Oakville to come to use those commercial facilities. So can you help us understand what the correlation would be with 393 and that? Because to me, I'm not seeing it.
Through you, your worship, certainly the parking standards, some of the elements are similar. The context is a bit different. This particular application is a major growth area center adjacent to a GO station, as opposed to being on a major arterial that has transit. Both have opportunities for commuting. The idea would be that in these particular locations, immediately adjacent to a GO station, that the reliance on the automobile would be less than it would be anywhere else in town. That's the basic logic behind that. Sure, there will be people that live there that will choose to drive nevertheless. But the basic principle and the opportunity to use another mode of transportation is more likely that way. In terms of the parking standard for residential component, 1 space per unit is something that at a minimum you want to achieve.
My concern is more from the commercial perspective.
From a commercial perspective, yes. The standard is, certainly the objective would be to have sufficient parking. That's the primary principle. And it's one of the issues that we're looking at as well as part of that. So we'll be reviewing that in the context of the development form, where the parking should be and that sort of thing as part of this. But that's something that we'll be looking at as well.
Excellent, thank you so much for that. So that would be my takeaway for staff. My recommendation would be maybe touch back on the commercial piece, just given the area. Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to double check with staff that they would be responding to the concerns that are raised in the letter from the adjacent landowner that we received just today.
I have not seen that. I apologize.
Okay. It's a letter from Werfolds, who's the landowner's lawyer. Which looks like.
Yes,
suppose he
certainly,
has
through you, Mr. Mayor, we'll be responding to all the correspondence that we receive, whether at this meeting or before the report comes forward.
Thank you very much.
Councillor has the deal for a second time.
So I have just a follow-up in terms of the urban edge or the street front. When you come back to council with this proposal again, can there be some context around green space and how you would see Midtown not be a cement jungle? And I use the word jungle loosely.
Yes, that's something that we certainly can discuss with the applicant.
Thanks very much.
All right, are there any listed delegations for this? Would you call the delegations?
Our one listed delegation is Bruce Hall.
Mr. Hall?
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Bruce Hall. I'm a partner with the Planning Partnership, and I'm here on behalf of the owners of this property, Can China Real Capital. Sorry, I'm just getting organized here. The owners are here tonight as well. If you have any questions of them, they'd be happy to answer any questions. I've been involved in this project since early 2018, and my firm has also been involved in the planning of Midtown since the early 2000s. 157 Cross is an underutilized site next to the Oakville GO station and within the Midtown Urban Growth Center. It has existing access to Cross Avenue and to the almost directly into the GO station. We consider this to be a true mixed-use development. As you've heard, it has retail, office, and residential. A lot of developments have sort of token amounts of retail to fill the ground floor, but there is an intent to have office, which will contribute to Midtown, provide people in Oakville the opportunity to live and work in the same community, maybe even within the same building. And the design has been optimized to use the site without precluding adjacent future development. We did spend a lot of time dealing with the compatibility of the site to the east. I've read the letter as well from the owner to the west, and they have a much larger site, but nonetheless, I think it's important. I've spoken with my friend who's their planner, and we're going to arrange a meeting with them and sit down and talk about how that can be accommodated. In terms of the process to date, all I'll say here is this is a preliminary meeting, and as you know, there's no decisions being made tonight. The only thing I will say further is that we had an extensive amount of pre-consultation on this application, and usually we have one pre-con meeting. We had 3 pre-con meetings, and a lot of those meetings were focused purely on urban design. The reason for our client's interest in this site and the acquisition of this property is really due to its location within a highly transportation-focused area, and the various features and elements as demonstrated on this map. We have the Oakville GO and Via Rail Station, the Oakville Bus Terminal, and really it's interesting that all these features converge at this location, and it's one of the most significant urban growth centers within the GTA. However, at the current time, as you know, the area is largely dominated by one-story, low-density, single-use, and automobile-oriented forms, with very few examples of development which serve to implement the long-term vision of Midtown. One example is in the lower right-hand corner, at the most recent office development at 610 Chartwell Avenue. As Mr. Heck pointed out, there's been some development that we've seen occur largely on the west side of Trafalgar Road. It's development approvals which are in a hold position until the servicing and transportation issues can be resolved. And on the east side of Trafalgar, what we're seeing is more office-oriented development, which I think is beneficial because it sort of sets the table to provide a good balance of jobs and housing within the area. And it's nice that the jobs come first. I'm not going to spend much time on this. It just signifies how much planning has gone into Midtown for high-density development and intensification over the last 20 years. There's been countless studies, and we see this as an evolution and an implementation of that, provided that we can satisfy the infrastructure and servicing requirements. One of the things that the question came up about was other similar instances. We see a number of transit-oriented developments that are occurring within the GTA around GO stations. They all seem to be on the east-west lakeshore line because of the high frequency of service. Burlington has recent examples of the Paradigm condos at the Burlington GO station on Fairview, in Port Credit around the Port Credit GO station, the North Shore condominium by Fram, and as well in the east end around the Pickering GO station, San Francisco by the Bay, which is in its 3rd phase. We see, in looking at the subject site, it presents a very similar context as we're speaking about in the previous examples. It's adjacent to the main Oakville GO station, as well as a Via Rail station, and about a 2-minute walk from that site. We see the challenges here being able to made into opportunities, to convert the existing challenges into a vibrant mixed-use node for Midtown, establish transit-supportive jobs and housing around the GO station, and an opportunities and willingness on the part of the owner to assist in the delivery of infrastructure in the future. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Mr. Heck went through the development. This is not a color scheme. It's just simply meant to illustrate the various uses. In terms of the built strong urban edge, I'll just elaborate a little bit about what Mr. Heck said. It really is to bring the activity to the street, to engage and enliven the street, and have a very close relationship. The further back you make it, the less successful it is. We've been asked to have a modest setback, but the important thing is that those uses have a direct relationship. They have doors. You can go into them directly. In terms of the types of units that we have here, of the 252 residential units, 87 are one-bedrooms and 165 are two-bedrooms in terms of the current mix. And I think that's important because in Oakville, unlike more urban contexts like downtown Toronto, you want to have a greater focus on larger units. I see these being taken up by empty nesters and singles, but as well as people that want to stay in Oakville due to a family connection, but there's nothing else that's affordable. So it allows them to at least get into the housing market, start a family, and stay in that type of unit until it meets or does not meet their needs. All parking is underground. In terms of these stats, the real notable statistics are about 6,000 square feet of office. And we find this sort of quantity hard to find. There's either very small offices or very large offices. I have a business that has about 35 employees, and we have about 6,000 square feet, and they're hard spaces to find. There's over 22,000 square feet of amenity proposed for this building, and that equates to about 8.5 meters or 90 square feet per unit. This is aside from any outdoor or private space. This is common space. It's actually very large and meaningful, quite larger than you'd see in other municipalities and jurisdictions. There's a good mix between indoor and outdoor space. It's connected to one another. The density of this development for a high-density development is about 7.1 FSI, which is relatively modest for this type of development. And the other thing I'll note is the bicycle parking is significantly over what's required. It's about 8 times what's required under the bylaw. These uses at grade, this is the retail that we're talking about. Sorry, I'm going a bit wide at the front here. Again, there's this strong built form edge. It's not set back significantly. There's direct access to all of these commercial retail units. The rest of the ground floor is lounge and lobby amenity. The second floor is this office space that we're talking about, and then ancillary uses. There's a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units, and then this is the 5th floor. All the amenities, the green is the indoor, and the line part is the outdoor. And again, this is, for someone that, is considering this sort of lifestyle, it's very attractive because it provides them with a lot of opportunities to have, fitness and other recreational amenities within this type. We are proposing 248 parking spaces, as was discussed. The bylaw requires 252 as it stands right now. My understanding is that there's no standard which currently applies to commercial and retail uses within the urban growth center next to the MTSA. Although we think it would be probably more appropriate to apply a 0.75 per unit per residential unit, and then pool all of the remaining parking spaces to be used by commercial, retail, and office, because there's various synergies that happen between those uses. And there's some uses that are busier during the day and some that are busier at night. Some of the retail users may come from the GO station, they'll park their car, they'll go to work, they'll come back, and they'll pop over and grab some food from M&M's or whatever it may be for takeout. As Mr. Heck said, this is the standard that's being applied to Midtown. If there's a place in Oakville where there's a reduced parking standard, this is the one that meets the policy framework to do so. I'm running out of time. I will just touch briefly on the site servicing infrastructure and then conclude. Midtown has long been planned for intensification, but the required investments are not yet committed. We know fully that this will have a hold. As was indicated, nothing will happen on this site until that servicing, it's not capacity, it's the infrastructure is resolved. The timing of this may be positively influenced by various tools or mechanisms, such as front-ending agreements. We've raised this in our report. We know it's a definite possibility, and this allows developments to move up in timing where developers are interested in potentially upfronting the costs prior to other development happening. Our client is interested in this discussion with the city to see if this can facilitate development occurring sooner than later. As well, the draft plan provides a mechanism for the required lands for the infrastructure and roads. There's a proposal for a 4-meter road widening along Cross, a 13-meter road dedication on the north end to facilitate the east-west road, and then maintenance of the 6-meter access between the properties. And I will finish right there.
Thank you very much for your information. Are there questions? Oh, look, a crop of questions. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two quick questions. And I apologize if it's in this report. I've gone over it a couple times and I can't find. Is this a rental building or is it a condominium?
At this point, it's proposed to be a condominium building.
Okay.
But nothing is determined for certain.
Both the residential and the commercial would be, are considered, or you're considering building it as a condominium for, on both? both
Certainly
uses?
for the residential at this point in time, as far as their intent about whether they condominiumize the commercial units and sell them off or keep them, I don't know about that, but that's a discussion we can have with staff.
Can you flip back to your floor plates? Your, you gave a couple examples. I think you skipped, there you go. What is the, it's way too small. What's the average, or what are the ranges of sizes of your units?
Oh. I can probably see it later now here. Pretty. So the 2 bedrooms are around 800 square feet, 700, 800 square feet. And the 1 bedrooms are 5 to 6, up to over 600.
Okay, and can you flip to the floor plate for the commercial level, the main level?
Yeah.
Are these demising walls already, like, are they part of the proposal, or is this going to be subject to?
At this point, it's conceptual.
So it's conceptual, okay.
Yeah, we
Wasn't
don't
sure.
know. I mean, sometimes what staff wants to see is they don't want to see one
Yeah.
big retailer. They want to see sort of demise to encourage independence. But at this point in time, there's no, it's a concept.
Is there a goal for, in the business plan, for the type of tenant that you're looking for this space?
I think it would be things that are compatible with the GO station and uses there in order to, take advantage of that base of business that's there. But, also that would, as I said, enable those synergies where necessarily not everybody is driving to this spot to use it. I think it's probably one of the most visible and closest retail spaces that would be accessible to the GO station. It's right across from the entrance.
Okay, thank you, Worship.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much for the presentation. You've got a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units that are being proposed. Was there any consideration given for 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom larger units? And if not, why not?
I think there's always, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, there's always the opportunity. I think a lot of times they start this way, and then there's the opportunity to combine units where they're desired. What we find in a lot of cases is to make a unit affordable, when it ends up being 1,000 square feet, it starts to get, depending on the price per square foot, it gets to be $1 million type of unit. So it's not always affordable for a family, for a starter family. So that's a conversation we can have with staff, whether there's some allowance given for a certain number of 3-bedroom units. But it's always better to have the opportunity to create and then decrease rather than increase.
So at a later date, before construction, you might consider modifying to change the mix of units that you have?
Yeah, I mean, what we find a lot of times is people come in, they'll say, I want to combine that 2-bedroom with that 1-bedroom and make a 3-bedroom unit, and that's their decision to make, as opposed to, putting that out there first and having it sort of imposed. And as I said, the price often gets to be, just given what our units are selling for on a per square foot basis in the GTA, and then multiplied by the size, it very often leads to something that's not affordable.
And so you're planning for smaller units in part because, is that because of the need for allocation units, or why wouldn't you pre-consider that you're going to have 5% of them as being 3-bedroom or something?
I think when we do our engineering and our servicing, we have to sort of, in all cases in parking, assume a worst case scenario, so we use a higher number.
So it's easier it's easier to go from 1 and 2 bedrooms to 3 bedroom than it is from 3 bedroom to splitting a unit up
Yes.
into smaller. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Elgar?
Yeah, thanks for coming, giving your presentation. You mentioned, you referred to Burlington, Port Credit, and Pickering. Do you have the numbers for those places? Number of units, number of parking spots, commercial, retail? Can you provide that to us?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't, but we can endeavor to do that. I heard the question of your planning director, your planning manager, sorry, and, you know, to look at those as well as what they're using for parking standards. I suspect we're going to have to do some additional work in terms of the parking, so it'd be a good idea to look at what other urban growth centers and MTSAs are using as a standard, you know,
Yeah,
to
no,
look
I
at
would
those
really
types of
appreciate it.
development, but also see what,
So you would be able to give exactly the stats that you have given so far?
For sure.
For yours. Okay, appreciate that. If you can give it to staff and they can get it to us, it'd be great. Thank you.
thank you.
Councillor Lischina?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question about what's the percentage of units that, first of all, are you pre-selling units before you actually start a build, wherever that start date is?
Yeah, every development and every bank and every project is different, but generally you have to go through a pre-sales process, and depending on the lender and where the market is, it's through you, Mr. Mayor, it varies anywhere from about 50 up to about 70%.
And just as Councillor Algal mentioned about the different examples you used of the high density around the GO stations, I'm assuming, it's probably a rhetorical question, but you'd also looked at key learnings of the negative things of those buildings. I'm not sure, even the noise from the trains, would a different glass be used or something to that effect, so our residents aren't complaining later?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. We've only made an application for rezoning and the draft plan of subdivision at this point. When we come in for site plan approval, there'll be another layer of reports and technical reports that are required, and with that will be a noise study. Metrolinx is a tough taskmaster to deal with in any development application, and they're probably the toughest overseer of making sure that development is compatible and that there's not going to be issues that come down the road.
I think they have to deal with Oakville too, so.
Councillor Grant?
Actually, that last comment kind of dovetails well with what I was going to ask. You'd mentioned briefly in your presentation preloaded Presto cards for people moving in. What other methods would you be using to market this building towards people who might be wanting to step away from automobile usage?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that point wasn't necessarily, you know, in effect, it would become a marketing tool, but really it's alternative transportation demand measures. When the transportation consultant says, you know, here's the number of parking spaces that you're providing, it's a suitable number, but in order to kind of make that more successful, here's some other things that you should do. Presto cards, some kind of shared vehicle usage, zip car, Car2Go is gone now, but you know, those types of things. Having a high standard of bike parking. They may even recommend, you know, when we do things like hotels and things like that, they basically want you to have shuttles that go to the transit. I think this might be a little short for that ride and might create more environmental damage on its own, but those types of things, and you know, we'll definitely, as we go through site plan process, that list will be enhanced in terms of those types of measures.
Okay. There's a building being built in the a series of buildings being built in the uptown core near one of our transit terminals. On the main floor, there's going to be at least a little station where it has all the bus times, what's moving, what's going on. Do you find that perhaps putting something like that in the main floor of the building, in the lobby, or even having something in the elevator remind people that, you know, your bus is leaving or there are buses in the area leaving at this time, might be a good way of pushing people onto transit?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, I mean, anything you can do like that, which encourages transit usage or discourages private automobile usage, without having a significant cost attached to it or not a lot of infrastructure, is a great idea. And it's just a matter what is going to be effective. I mean, this development is a bit unique in that it's so close to the transit. Like, people, I think, are they're going to do it or they're not going to do it. You can sort of help them out, but
All right, well, you'll find that we're very tender about parking, so
Yeah.
anything you can do to try and alleviate that issue might be good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Hall.
thank you very much.
Madam Clerk, is there any other listed delegation? Members of the public, is there anyone here with information for council? Basically, what this meeting is for is to identify issues for staff to return in their recommendation report addressing. So if you've got them, now's the time to raise them. And with that, I'll confine it to table and look for a motion. The motion that we require is that the public meeting report be received, that the comments from the public be received, and that the analysis of the following matters of interest to council be included as part of the recommendation report. And Mr. Planning Director, did you catch any from council that weren't already on your list? If so, please list them.
Through Mayor Burton, some of these were on the list, but I wanted to particularly emphasize that we took note of them. I'll start with the dominant one: staff to review parking standards, transportation demand measures, how other developments along the GO line are establishing parking rates, what other measures can be undertaken to promote use of public transit, how Bill 108 will impact this proposal, how will provincially proposed mobility hubs impact this proposal, confirm the uses and the reasons for the holding provisions. Can staff review the timing of realignments of various road networks in the Midtown area and the timing of this development? Can staff respond to the concerns from the adjacent landowner? And can there be some context and analysis around the green space proposed as part of the urban edge design?
Well, Councilor, did that capture everything? Councilor Giddings, something else? Thank you. May I put the vote? All those in favor? And thank you, everybody, for your hard work on that file. The next discussion item is the Lakeshore Road West Class Environmental Assessment Update. We have a presentation from Jill Stephen, our Director of Engineering and Construction, and we have registered delegations from the public. So, Ms. Stephen, we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Start here. So tonight's report is on page 37 of the agenda. Tonight I'd like to provide a bit of background on where we've been with the EA, where we are now, talk a little bit about the proposed path forward with respect to this study and another study that we'd like to do as part of this work, as well as provide an update on the multi-use trail east of the study area that is proposed as well. So this will be familiar to most members of council, but the Livable Oakville Plan and the Active Transportation Master Plan both recommended the need for improvements along Lakeshore Road between Mississauga Street and Dorval Drive. And so to address those, in 2016, we initiated a class environmental assessment study to address current and future transportation needs for all modes of transportation, looking at accessibility and safety, as well as the pavement condition and drainage conditions along the road. We established a multidisciplinary cross-departmental staff team to do this work, led by engineering and construction, but including representation from multiple groups within planning and across the corporation. So just as a refresher, this is the study area we were looking at. As I mentioned, it goes from Mississauga Street in the west to Dorval Drive in the east. And just to illustrate, again, why we are undertaking the study, this photograph illustrates the pavement conditions on some stretches of Lakeshore. We have soft shoulders, we have sidewalks on one side, not on the other, and a lack of continuous active transportation or cycling infrastructure. So we wanted to address all of those things as well as the drainage. Engagement and consultation is an important part of all of our Class EAs. This slide illustrates some of the formal consultation efforts that were done. So we had open houses in 2017, first to learn about the project and provide people early opportunity to provide input. and then in November to provide an opportunity for input on the preliminary concepts. In May of 2018, we did take a report to Community Services Committee recommending the draft environmental study report be approved, and that was sent back for additional consultation with the stakeholders. So following that, in July, we had a public meeting to gather more input from the residents to ensure that as we moved forward with the study, we were taking into account all of the comments and concerns that they had. As I mentioned, these are some of the formal points of contact we had, but we have had numerous meetings with various stakeholders along the corridor, so being residents associations, churches, schools, and others, the Bronte BIA, as well as on-site meetings and in-person meetings with a number of the individual residents along the corridor. This is the cross-section that was previously recommended. We are advancing different cross-sections, but just to show you where we've been and where we're headed, I wanted to include this illustration. So in March and April of this year, we did have additional meetings with the stakeholders. We presented them with new options, but this is, as I said, where we were. We've moved on from that point. So in August of last year, when we were here providing an update to Planning and Development Council, we recommended extending the study timeline so that we could do further engagement with the stakeholders. And at that meeting, we were asked to report back with another option, at least one option that removed the center turn lane, that didn't result in a loss of trees, that didn't result in the need to take property, did include continuous cycling lanes, and had a sidewalk or multi-use path on at least one side. And as well as that, we were looking to minimize impervious surfaces. So since that time, we have been working with our staff team and with our consulting team to come up with further options to meet council's direction. We've done a number of different analysis reports and reviewed some of the work that had previously been done to look at the scenic corridor elements. We've looked again at our traffic studies and the need for the center turn lane, which we are not proposing to move forward with at this point. Updated the drainage study, looked at the feasibility of various different protected bike lane options. And the options that we have advanced have reduced tree impacts and have included additional mitigation measures from what you saw last May. We did hold meetings with those stakeholder groups on draft options at the end of March and the beginning of April this year, and following that had a number of on-site meetings or in-person meetings with residents. This rendering, it just shows one option in one location that we were looking at. I show this today to show you how we have been trying to accommodate and include all of the different components of that recommendation from last August. So you'll see in this illustration that we have a sidewalk on one side, a multi-use trail on one side, continuous bike lanes with a painted buffer. The center turn lane has been removed. And instead of having a multi-use trail that just continued in one location along the corridor, you'll see that it meanders and moves so that it does protect the existing vegetation that's there. As I said, this is one of the options that we were looking at. It was presented to the stakeholders in May and April, but has not, or sorry, March and April, but has not been out to the broader public at this point. So, through the official plan and as identified on the urban structure maps, Lakeshore Road and Trafalgar Road, the portion that's south of Cornwall Road, have been identified as scenic corridors. The Livable Oakville plan provides direction on how we should be treating the scenic corridors and how we should be protecting the features. The Coronation Park Residents Association was one of the stakeholders that was involved in the meetings in March and April. And following the meeting, they expressed a desire to see more specific evaluation criteria related to the scenic corridor developed. And then the different options that had been put forward for the road should be evaluated against those criteria. So while we have worked to try and incorporate the things that we felt were important and did reflect the scenic corridor, they have not been expressly identified. And so the desire of the Coronation Park Residents Association is that we do develop those in consultation with residents and then use those in our evaluation. So while that term wasn't wasn't expressly presented in that resolution from last August, we did understand that it was inherent in the direction that was provided to us. So we were looking to provide an option that didn't impact the trees, the property, or increase the impervious surfaces. But there could be other characteristics of Lakeshore Road that are not captured in those different elements, but that do contribute to the scenic corridor. And so those characteristics would be used to help evaluate the different road options before we finalize the EA. The official plan review work program did include and does include a scenic corridor study. The study is proposed to be advanced to allow us to use the information from that study to finalize the EA. The study would be used to develop policies for and guidelines to identify the appropriate uses, scale of development, and connectivity along the scenic corridor. And then we would consider those as we evaluate options for Lakeshore Road and finalize the EA. So advancing the scenic corridor study does mean that we take a bit of a pause on the EA in order to get that work to a point where we know which elements are really important and which are the ones that contribute to that scenic character of Lakeshore Road, which make Lakeshore Road special and which make it what it is. Once we have those clearly defined and vetted through the community and the stakeholders, we would use those to update the analysis of the road options and then bring that forward to council for consideration. Depending on how much additional work is needed, there may be some financial impacts on our study that we need to address, but that won't be known until we know how much additional work we need to do. So that summarizes where we're at currently with the Lakeshore Road EA and what our recommendations are. So to advance the scenic corridor study and then move forward with finalizing the Lakeshore Road EA. We do have a multi-use trail east of the study area, east of downtown, which has been in the works for a number of years. It's identified in the active transportation master plan, and it's one that we had been actively working on the design and moving forward, wanting to move forward with this year. It does fall under the scenic corridor as well, but we are recommending that we continue to proceed with this. We think this is an opportunity to showcase how we have been able to use the design and respect the existing elements by narrowing the path or changing the alignment so that we can protect what is actually in the corridor today and not have impacts to trees or utilities or property. So this is a very small segment of the corridor just shown so that you could actually see it on the screen. But you can see that the path does wind a little bit. We are moving it away from the trees. An important consideration we heard from residents along here was they wanted to maintain the boulevard. So we're doing that, but we're shifting it where we need to. And we're also moving it around the hydro poles so that we don't need to be replacing or moving those as part of providing this infrastructure. So just in conclusion, the recommendations of the report tonight are that the report be received, that staff be move forward with the scenic corridor study for the Lakeshore Road East, Lakeshore Road West, and Trafalgar, and that the scope and scale of the EA be amended so that the findings of that study can be incorporated. And Mr. Mayor, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much. Councillor Lischina?
Thank you, Your Worship. Jill, the question about the scenic corridor study. So you're saying if we don't do it, there could be elements that could be destroyed as we're doing the paths? Is that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, more so that we want to ensure that when we're evaluating the different options for the road, we're incorporating all of the things that are important that make Lakeshore Lakeshore, and that we are protecting those things that are important and through mitigation or moving the path. So we want to understand. We know that the trees are important. We know that reducing the impervious surface is important. We know that maintaining, not taking property is important. But if there are other things that weren't captured in the different design alternatives that we presented in the spring, we'd like to know that before we finalize.
So then the scenic corridor study would not, depending on what items were identified, those would then be protected doesn't matter how much of cost it is to do extra around them. Is that what you're saying?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think we need to understand what they are. There may be some things that we have to balance. So without a good, knowing exactly what they could be, I would be hesitant to say at this point.
Councillor Dudek?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to staff. First of all, thank you ever so much to yourself and the department for all your hard work on this. I think it speaks to the fact that we want to get this right. We don't want to rush through something. And sort of building on what Councillor Lischina mentioned about is it going to be protected? I think what we wanted to see, and it wasn't just Coronation Park residents, it was others along the corridor, is a lens by which we can look at what's being proposed and sort of use that to color what design we use and what kind of work is needed. It doesn't mean it's static, but it means that there'll be due consideration given to that, whether it's heritage, cultural, landscape, whatever. And as you pointed out, it's more than just the trees, it's more than just the pavement. There's other aspects that fall into that. So as I say, I wanted to just say that the fact that you arranged so many on-site meetings with so many of the residents, they were so impressed with staff that and the consultant coming out, taking the time to actually walk the properties with them, to be able to share with them their concerns was invaluable, and I commend you.
Councillor Chisholm?
I echo my colleagues' comments, just a couple added things. I'm very pleased with the direction we're taking with respect to the corridor study. I think that's excellent. I think that's something that is forth with thinking in Ontario. I know there are other municipalities that are looking at this. I think we'll be one of the leaders looking at special areas of development. It's not one size fits all. It is something that is custom and it's going to work for our community. However, you're right. I think there'll be opportunities. There might have to be some compromise or some jiggling, I guess, of with respect to the report and what we're doing. But I think what we've been involved with Councillor Dudek and myself with the on-site meetings with staff, and staff have been very receptive, looking at this and coming up with creative solutions. I was very impressed overall the process that we're at now, so congratulations to staff, and I'm hoping and I'm really excited moving forward on this project. Thank you, and I'm not even worried about the delay, as long as we do it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Adams?
Thank you very much. Could staff tell me when, as we're going through this process, how we are considering what limits there might be on the available transportation capacity for not only Lakeshore, but Trafalgar Road that we're considering as part of the scenic transportation network, I'll say, and whether that has limits the capacity of downtown Oakville, Kerr Street, Bronte, growth nodes to be able to take the capacity of growth that was previously expected, and whether if we modify the allowances on these particular road networks, whether we ought to also be changing our thoughts around the urban planning for those areas.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the transportation study that we did for Lakeshore is showing that we won't have a lot of growth in vehicular traffic along the corridor, provided, of course, that we are continuing to provide other ways for folks to travel. The additional trips that we'll see on our network as a result of growth will go to other corridors more so than they would go to Lakeshore. The Whitecroft Bridge is an example of another connection that will provide an east-west option to folks who choose not to take the QEW. So I don't think from a capacity perspective that we have a major issue on Lakeshore that would be changing things.
But we are changing the network. So there is a change, because we're modifying, we're, let's say, downgrading in some ways the capacity of the vehicle traffic. We're perhaps improving the cycling and pedestrian traffic ability on those roadways or those corridors. But that means that there's going to be a push towards some of the more northern east-west roads, for example?
Through Mr. Mayor, the center turn lane that was previously recommended would have provided a bit of additional capacity, but would also be more of an operational improvement, more so than capacity to allow for the left turns. But our modeling was, as I said, was showing that we're not expecting an overall increase in vehicular traffic if we see that shift. So yes, we would see additional cycling trips perhaps on the corridor, but that's one of the reasons I think that it's one of the reasons we had included cycling infrastructure in our analysis. I think one of the reasons why council directed us to ensure that we brought forward an option that did include good cycling infrastructure for your consideration when we do finalize the EA.
Okay, and the issue around Trafalgar Road, which is an aside to the Lakeshore issue, one of the concerns that I've always had is the inability to expand the southern piece of Trafalgar Road into old downtown Oakville.
Yeah.
And it's limiting capacity for carrying northern traffic into our old historic downtown. Are there considerations around how to ease that concern?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think Trafalgar Road is, we have very limited choices of what we can do there, and that's why we recommended super sharrows as an example, as instead of bike lanes. So, you know, it's not an area where we can really increase the capacity. It would have to come into downtown from other directions in order, if there was a need for more trips to come in that way.
So the concept would really be around trying to determine specifically what things need to be protected along that corridor, if there was any change made to that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Chisholm, did you want to go again? Madam Clerk, would you call the listed delegations?
Our first delegation is Pamela Knight.
Welcome, Ms. Knight. Council looks forward to your information.
I think that's it. Yep. Let's click on it and find out. Yep, that's it, thanks.
So all you're gonna do is hit the arrow down and I'll bring you to the next slide.
That'll
okay?
take it. Okay, great, thank you so much. Mr. Mayor, members of council, good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to come and speak to you this evening. Obviously, you know why I'm here. I know you've got a packed agenda after us, so my comments will be very brief. So first of all, why we're here. We indeed support the request by staff for a scenic corridor study. And this evening, we thought would be a good time to say thank you to our councillors, first of all, Councillors Dudek and Chisholm, because they've worked really hard on this with us over the last more than a year. And as well to say thank you to Ms. Stephen, because her efforts have got us here this evening as well. So thank you to both. We also want to wish that, or ensure that our interests are indeed covered. I had asked that this particular document be circulated. I think everybody has it. Just to take a step backwards, about a year or so, when we first started talking about this project, one of the terms that sort of came into the conversation was something called context-sensitive design. And it sort of mirrors what Ms. Stephen was just talking about in terms of creating roads that are sensitive to the things that are around them. This particular document was put together by Region of Waterloo back in 2011, and it's a resource document that's really there it's for staff, it's for planners, it's for transportation people, and it lays out some really good information, and some of that information we wanted to share with you this evening. So the first is they note that the function of transportation corridors is shifting from being a pure capacity conduit to serving as a place that's part of the community identity and the fabric. That, of course, is music to our ears because For years, we've been saying that Lakeshore Road is not only a municipal asset, but we've called it the jewel in the crown, pardon me. It really is iconic. It's part of what Oakville is all about. When somebody thinks about Oakville, Lakeshore Road is part of that identity. So it's not just a road. This goes to the second point. It's the understanding of the road as a place. As a contributing element in the character of its surroundings, provides the foundation for planning, development, conservation of special character streets and scenic roads. So again, it's a situation where we need to think about that road as a place. Just as we think about neighborhoods and the character of neighborhoods, we want to think about Lakeshore Road in the same way. It has heritage as well. It's part of the King's Highway, which of course reaches back to the 1930s. And that heritage has remained with Lakeshore into the decades now. The document also highlights that historic downtowns, heritage buildings, natural spaces, things of this nature are some of the most highly valued community assets. And again, that's music to our ears. The last point in this particular area points to the fact that the streets that you have with a canopy effect are some of the most highly prized. And once again, in Oakville, the little picture that I've shown you there is actually First Street. But we've got a number of them. You know, Gloucester, Douglas Avenue, the street I live on, Belvedere Drive, has that canopy effect itself. So we're happy to see this resource document. We're happy to see that someone has pulled it together and sort of given someone a roadmap in terms of what they should be looking at in assessing these assets. So as you already know, our position is that we think that Lakeshore is an iconic feature of what defines Oakville and its appeal. We support the improvement of Lakeshore Road, and we believe that the goal is attainable by working with the road's current natural and human environment. And by using some care, consideration, and creativity, we think we can create something that will serve the purpose that we want, but retain and preserve it the way it should be. So, as I note in the third point, we want to preserve Lakeshore, but we also want to make sure that we continue to preserve those neighborhoods that it traverses, because that's important, obviously. So we have a request, of course. Moving forward, we ask that the Scenic Corridor Study support the concept of the road as a place. We would hope that the work group that's going to work on this is going to use that lens in looking at the road. Secondly, we would hope that the study would include representatives from planning and heritage and others if important. I know that the consultant's report in the past has indeed been circulated to departments, but I think that if this is going to have a slightly different lens, that it really makes the involvement of those people even more important than it has been in the past. We obviously also want to have ongoing communication with the team. Other residents associations, obviously if Trafalgar Road is going to be involved in this, that'll touch on another ward too. Oakville Green perhaps, the residents who have been directly involved. We would hope that as the process moves forward, that there's going to be back and forth communication, opportunities for input and comment, so that we all sort of arrive at a place where we want to be together. And last but not least, that perhaps Oakville would consider sharing a suggestion with Halton Region and its remaining municipalities to undertake work that mirrors this project that was undertaken by the region of Waterloo. That's the end of my comments, and I thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Councillor Dudek?
Thank you, as always, for your input and your comments in regards to the matter. Just to speak to, you were talking about Halton Region. I have shared with a couple of our neighboring municipalities, Burlington being one, the heritage component, because another one coming from Joseph Brandt along was part of that Kings Highway CD that was produced years and years ago, which was very, very well received. In fact, I think our museum still has copies, where it basically took you along that whole corridor. So as I say, very, very worthwhile, and I do look forward to working, as does Councillor Chisholm.
As do we.
Thank you very much.
Could I just clarify a point with Councillor Adams, Mr. Mayor?
I beg your pardon?
Could I possibly clarify a point with Councillor Adams regarding the traffic? Would that be possible?
Sure.
Yes, no? I just wanted to, I don't have the traffic reports with me, and as Ms. Stephen identified, the road is 2 lanes at this point, and the studies that were undertaken from a traffic standpoint revealed that given the projected numbers on the road, it would still function well within what was required into the future as a 2-lane road. So we're actually not downgrading anything.
I don't mean to say that the road is disappearing as a function. I only mean to say there's, you know.
It'll still serve that function.
There's, I understand it'll still serve that function, but if you're removing a turn lane, you're removing some element of capacity.
It doesn't have a turn lane now.
No, I understand that, but there was a version of it that showed that.
Right.
And if that's off the table, does that change the transportation network? That was my question to our staff.
It doesn't affect it, according to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, the next delegation. Oh, sorry. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. Just for clarity, there are going to be left-hand turning lanes at specific intersections, so it's not completely not without left-hand turning lanes.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. Madam Clerk.
The next delegation is Mark Verlinden.
Thank you very much, sir. Council, it's time to make a decision then. Councillor Duddick. Thank you. May I put the vote? All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is also carried. Thank you, everybody. The next item is the parking management update that the Commissioner spoke about earlier. And we have a presentation from our Director of Planning Services.
Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of council. Tonight's item can be found on page 45, tab 4 of tonight's agenda. This is just a presentation report to give you a brief summary of the parking report that's in tonight's agenda. As you know, council had directed staff, I believe it was in April, to come back with a report by July. We're here in early August, and tonight's report will give you a highlight of what steps we're going to undertake next. Essentially, tonight's report is meant to seek council's input onto the framework for the terms of reference that we'll be coming back to, and so make sure we get it right. We want to make sure we have that clear understanding as we do that document. It's anticipated it will be at your September 9th P&D council meeting. So as council is aware from the work undertaken through the update for the Transportation Master Plan, the automobile is the predominant mode of travel in the town, accounting for 8.8 out of every vehicle trips. This is the 2016 TMP. The reason I say that is that the focus here has been largely on parking, but I think it's intertwined with matters of land use and general mobility, and we see that as an important connector piece in terms of how this project goes forward, because the solutions, filling more parking lots sometimes adds more cars to the road, which means the roads get bigger and have an impact on livability. So we see that as interconnected pieces, and we want to make sure that we get this right. In the staff report, you'll notice there's a Transportation Canada study that identifies that on average Canadian cars are parked 23 hours a day. Now, I'm not sure if your cars are parked that much, but this is information according to Transport Canada. And sorry, here's the slide. I neglected to do it. And I believe Councillor Algar, you had noticed before in in your comments on another matter that the number of average vehicles per household is steadily climbing in Oakville. So this puts pressure on the road network. Roads tend to want to be wider, and then they want to park all those cars. So it starts to impact things that we don't necessarily want to lose sight of. So what we're looking at is a recognition in this document that we live in the time of the car, but we also live in the time of transition. And we're trying to look at things that aren't permanent, but they do address the needs that each and every one of you councillors have expressed to us over the last several months. And we want to make sure that we don't lose what is the livable aspect of Oakville as we go through this process. So yeah, in the 2018 Transportation Master Plan, it concluded that that it's not sustainable simply to add cars to the road. So in some cases, you want to make other choices. You might want to use mobility in a broader sense. Maybe it's active transportation, it's public transit. It's replacing the need for mobility with proximity of things you need to go to. So you have more mixed-use neighborhoods, so that's the land use component. And road widening could really just end up being a way to reduce, as I said before, the livability of Oakville. Could impact the character of the residents. We just heard a presentation and concerns from Coronation Park about the loss of the treed canopy and the special nature of that roadway. You get increased noise level, ecological footprint, the list goes on, and you can see the information on the slide. This was the direction to staff back in July. And again, tonight's purpose was to identify this issue, having regard to what we're going to be coming back for, and see if you have any other comments for us to consider as we move forward. And again, issues that were identified by members of council were community uses such as new schools and how they're being underparked, likely resulting on increased demand on on-street parking at certain times of the day, which has conflicts with the residents, and want to see what we can do about that. I'm thinking of visitors and residents in higher density projects, particularly seniors developments, and I'm thinking of Bronte when I think of that, some concerns there. And then visitors to our Main Street areas, so they have access to our commercial facilities and those places can remain vibrant. So the parking management plan, from a staff perspective, we've taken that and basically packaged it up through our observations and our experiences and say, we'd like to also consider the newly developed residential areas in North Oakville. Again, reminding ourselves that we're not looking at permanent solutions that deviate much from what we're trying to achieve in terms of livability, but at the same time trying to provide a practical solution to the issue of parking management. So again, community uses as schools, the commercial areas, including Bronte Village, and the high-density mixed-use development and seniors housing, including the visitor parking, which has been identified as an issue. In the short term, you'll see on the slide before you, we have identified things that we think, we'll use the word low-hanging fruit, that can be done in the short term outside of the study that I'm talking to you about now. And again, so you might see things like providing more on-street parking. I know from Jim Berry that through his analysis of the permit system, there is still capacity in some streets in North Oakville. So perhaps through education about the location of those spaces and just more information to the community, that might, in the short term, provide more parking supply. Providing, less of a setback from the driveway. This may or may not be practical, but these are things that can be investigated for further use to simply look at the issue of increasing the short-term parking. So the recommendations on the screen for you to see. We will be coming back, I believe, coming back at the next Planning and Development Council meeting with the terms of reference, and if there's additional matters you'd like us to undertake, we will put that in that staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Sanju.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Thank you so much, Mr. Simeoni. I just have a suggestion, actually. So I'm looking at page 51 of the report, and we have some things that are included as quick wins and in your chart as well. One of the other suggestions that I have is additional information provided to residents that are maybe new coming to the area. Obviously, we'll put it in our Ward 7 newsletters, but I think either at the purchase phase or something else that would be able to come from the town that indicates potential transit routes and what the potential timeline would be on the transit routes. I know that we'd spoken some time ago about there being kind of a chicken and egg scenario with with the demand for the transit in the area, but we want to make sure that there's enough demand before we place the transit, but nobody's going to take the transit until there's enough people there. So there's a lot of kind of back and forth there, and I think a lot of the newer folks that are coming into the area may not be being told that either by the real estate agent or by the builder. So we want to be clear, I think, to residents coming forward, and I think that will help alleviate at least some of the concerns about getting to the GO station on time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Adams?
Thank you very much for the report. On page 49, and beginning on page 48, you have a list of areas that have been observed as areas of concern. The fourth one is the high-density mixed-use development and seniors housing, including visitor parking. And I wonder, in the term high-density, whether some of the higher-density medium, what we in the planning world describe as medium-density townhouse kind of format, whether some of that would also be included in that. The example that I've got that's south of Dundas is the area around Upper Middle Road and Grosvenor, where we've got some townhouse complexes where we do know that we've got residents who are parking on the side streets because they have inadequate parking in their townhouse complex. Whether that would be another kind of example, that's a very good specific example where we might consider either paid parking on the streets or some other relief or way of addressing that issue. Could staff consider that?
Certainly, through you, Mayor Burt, we could look at that.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Knoll?
Thank you, Worship. And to add to the Christmas wish list, just by way of background, many weeks ago, Councillor Grant and I used to represent north of Dundas in the new housing area, and I can tell from my own experience, the number one complaint that I had during that period of time was the lack of parking due to the excessive uptake of parking permits. So we were it was a scenario, and I don't know if this is the same now, but it was a scenario particularly in the first phases of above Dundas where there was no visitor parking at all because the people had expanded beyond the garages and taken out parking permits on the street. So that long run up, it leads to this question: will you be examining the efficacy of the parking permit system to determine whether or not it is worth keeping, whether there are changes that can be made to make it more equitable? And one last little bit of input. I know that in the Laneway community in Oak Park that we represent still, and I live, I know that that's always been a pressure from the day that the community was built. And every time a resident takes up a petition to ask for permit parking, it gets turned back because neighbors know what the implication is of that their mothers-in-laws and, friends won't be able to park anywhere because they will all be taken up. So I'd be very curious to know whether that works. If it isn't working, how can we fix it? And is there a hybrid potentially to adjust that permit system that people seem to think they want and then hate when they get it? That's my experience.
I'll ask Mr. Barry to respond to your question.
Deflection.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do understand the question, and that will be included.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mark, Director Simeone, I'm just wondering about possible innovative ways, especially in particular in our Main Street areas. I know what we're looking at doing downtown Oakville in terms of smart technologies and smart meters, but is there a way that we can look at, what sort of apps are out there that will give you in real time where exactly that free spot is, so it'll save people from circling around and as people hands-free devices are connected in their cars, they just hit their GPS and you make two lefts and there's your parking spot. Can we maybe look at some innovative ways to meet our main street areas?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we can include that. We can touch on that. What I can say is we actually are working through a program right now to introduce a parking management system in downtown Oakville that would be expandable to other areas that actually is exactly what you're talking about.
Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director, a question regarding timing on this. It talks about surveys will be coordinated with completion Bronte pilot, and downtown improvements. So for downtown, that would be spring 2021 for any sort of study?
Through you, Your Worship, I believe that's correct, if that's the end date. The concern there is that we get false data by measuring things that aren't the regular traffic patterns. So the work would have to be completed.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Grant.
Sorry, Christmas wish list was commented on earlier, and maybe, are we chasing windmills by, bottom of page 49, encourage greater use of active modes of transportation of residents. I can speak to the fact that our transit system has become much improved over the last few years, but if a person wants to take their car, and this is the problem that we've been having with our modal splits since we first talked about modal splits, if a person wants to have a car, they're going to use their car. What bag of tricks do we have that's new to encourage people to find other ways of moving themselves around the town?
Through you, Mayor Burton, that's a great question. Partly the answer will lie in our work. But as a cyclist, an active cyclist myself, I can tell you when the road doesn't accommodate me, I'm not likely to use it. So available infrastructure that works well and is safe to the rider is something that active transportation people might follow up on. And every little bit will count in this conversation.
Fair enough. And I know that we're expanding, or the region's expanding Trafalgar and Dundas, so we'll have a better transportation system for buses. But even then, let's say I want to get 20 pounds of kitty litter at Walmart. Taking a bus is not the best way to do that, or even cycling for that matter. So again, you know, it's a difficult thing for us to try and imagine encouraging people to do that type of thing.
Through Your Worship, great question, and all I can say is that hopefully the work will give us some sense of what that will yield in terms of benefits.
Okay, thank you. Just concerned that we're chasing clouds that we can't capture. Thank you.
Councillor Hazard-Thiel, did you have a cloud to chase here?
Not a windmill. So I'm pleased to see that downtown is in one of the reference points because it's long been a concern of our ward around the parking capacity in downtown and in particular the impact it has on attracting employers downtown and obviously the vibrancy of downtown. But I'm a bit concerned about timing. I agree that the accuracy is 2021. So just for clarity, are you going to report back twice, sort of once on the initial, here's what we're working on, and then here's what the data is telling us? I'm a bit confused.
So thank you again, through you, Mayor Burton, great question. We've estimated the parking study itself will take 10 months to a year to complete. More time for Bronte and the downtown will be required given the current situation. So yes, we'll be reporting back 2 separate occasions.
Thanks very much.
Anybody else? Going once, going twice? Anybody like to give us a motion? Councillor Knoll. Thank you. May I put the vote? All in favor? None opposed. Thank you. That carries. Let's turn our attention to the item number 5. We have a presentation from the planning director on the Oakville planning staff's discussion paper, which they've released for discussion and consultation, and we can start tonight with this presentation. And I should mention this is in regard to the Halton Integrated Growth Management Strategy work, which, to set the table, is work being that's required to be done presently at the region of Halton to examine where to distribute 180,000 new residents between the years 2031 and 2041. So this is planning far out into the future. All dates and numbers approximate, I have concluded in my time here. And with that, I look forward to your presentation, Mr. Planning Director.
Thank you, Mayor Burton, members of council. Although this is very much a regional process, tonight we're going to talk to you about how that regional process should be viewed from staff perspective here in Oakville. So how do we, from the ground up, as it were, understand this process and its importance in this community and what we should be thinking about as we go forward? I will tell you there's 2 parts to this discussion. Tonight we're talking about the the growth part of it, and there'll be another part coming back from the region in the fall, which we'll provide you another update on, about the evaluation criteria. So there's 4 scenarios, and there'll be certain evaluation criteria assigned to them. So it'll be the lens with which you weigh the criteria. So tonight is part of a 2-phase discussion here in Oakville, and the benefit is that you'll be informed on at least our perspective tonight as you have consultations with the community. So as Mayor Burtons has said, the growth plan requires us to grow. The province requires us to grow through the growth plan. The 2041 number is 1 million people, so 180,000 new people in the region of Halton. And if you look at the number of 1 million, Oakville is about 32, 33, 34% of the regional total in terms of population. So that's the number that may get assigned to us from the region if we maintain our current growth rates. The number of 470,000 jobs is a constant number that exists throughout all of the scenarios, but the population numbers can vary. So the region is doing its, where it, how, and wants to grow is referred to as the Halton Region's Integrated Growth Management Strategy. At the planning director level and other staff, we've been involved in this project for about 1.5 years now, providing input based on approved council documents. So your perspective has very much been in the process through a technical lens provided by staff. Again, the region is looking to allocate a certain amount of people, and this strategy provides 4 scenarios in which they would use for council, regional council, to decide how and where it wants to grow. Council has already turned its mind to this issue. In the last year, council has approved OPA Official Plan Amendment number 15. And you recall that was the town's urban structure. And the region worked closely with town staff on that, and it's now been fed up to that process. It's under appeal through another land use planning matter, but that's not to say your voice and Oakville's voice is not at the table. So Oakville is sort of further down this curve in the context of the region of Halton. And in Oakville's context, our growth management strategy really is the urban structure. So you see the map on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. And it really directs growth to the nodes and corridors. And if you look on the map, it's the circles. So the Bronte Go, Oakville Go, Uptown, Trafalgar, around the hospital, HUM, North Palermo now, Bronte Village, Kerr Street, downtown. That's where we'd like to see the majority of our growth go in this community. And then the other areas are open space and, employment lands, and of course, the stable residential neighborhoods, which does allow some options for growth. There are effectively 4 growth centers in the regional's integrated growth management scheme. So right now on the map, I'm going to try to use this to help us understand. So we've got, you'll see the numbers 500 hectares, 250, then the number 3B, and 4 at 1,000. 3B has 0. What you're looking at essentially here, if you look at the map, so if I look at, thank you, if I look at on the map where I'm putting the cursor, you see some purple there, that's in Milton. That's the designated greenfield areas. Oakville is at the bottom here with the North Oakville portion, and our friends in Halton Hills have a little bit left. The 0 number represents no increase on that above the current official plan that we have. So you would not see those lines in the map getting any bigger. They would retain all of that 180,000 people and 470,000 new, the total amount of growth between now and 2041. Actually, we've already planned to 2031, so we're talking the period 2031 to 2041. The 0 hectare or 3B option would see no expansion of those lines. They would not become any bigger. So you're not going to spread out. You're not going into the white belt. You're going to not go into the green belt. You're going to stay within you're going to color within the lines. And what that essentially means is, from a planning staff standpoint, we believe the best option from an Oakville perspective is no expansion to the green belt. So that's 3B. That's the 0 hectare increase in land mass or land availability or land supply. And this would be accomplished, in our opinion, best by focusing on building in existing designated greenfield areas. So that was that purple part of the map that we saw. Our built-up areas, and particularly our built-up areas in Oakville's context, if you remember our urban structure map, in our designated growth areas, our corridors, our nodes, our midtown. And to the best that we can, not always in the stable residential neighborhood, but some intensification where it's appropriate may occur. The other option is to integrate residential with employment lands development. So right now, council is undertaking a review of the Bronte GO Station. That's looking at that possibility, how that may occur. There's work that's being done by staff now around the area, around the hospital, to see what may exist in that context. So there are some employment conversions with a more of a mixed-use development outcome that may be beneficial and where growth may occur in the fullness of time. So this is where we're going. That slide. Okay. Planning staff position is that this map that you've approved is the best position for Oakville, and in a regional context, we see that the growth that stays within the existing boundaries has the least impact on things that we all hold dear to us here in Oakville. No expansion of the greenfields, build communities where people choose to live without a car. We heard a presentation tonight about Midtown and how that might be achieved. Putting density where transit is, putting lots of stuff within walking distance of stations, terminals, a more complete pedestrian network. Remember, we're talking in the build out to 2041. It is a change from the status quo. The status quo right now has always been to go a little bit further out, a little bit into the open areas and the natural areas. We don't think that's the right move for Oakville in the context of the Halton IGMS study. And why? Sorry, I'm having trouble. Give me one sec here. Well, as we said earlier, more roads mean more cars. And if you spread yourself out, you'll be driving more. More cars mean more carbon emissions. I understand Oakville has just passed a climate change emergency statement. Lost my thought there. And so saying no to growth will not save Oakville from the effects of growth. The people that drive from places north of Oakville to get to the Oakville GO and the Bronte GO will be coming down Highway 25 in Trafalgar, and those roads will have to get bigger, because you will not be able to do that if we don't do it in a more efficient way. Spreading it out will not be a solution for that. It does help address the cost of housing because you're going to provide more supply in a smaller area. It helps address an aging population by putting them in close proximity to services they need that don't have to travel great distances, and this is good for them. Promotes active, healthy lifestyles. It protects prime agricultural land, though none here in Oakville, but it's part of the Halton region package. And most importantly, it protects the natural heritage system and its biodiversity. We think these are important features of Halton region. So we've also, at the back of your agenda tonight, Appendix A, I believe it is, you'll find a white paper that the mayor had referred to. We've done that to provide an opportunity for the council and this community to enter into conversation. Back in, I think it was June or May, Regional Council said this IGMS study should go to the communities. There should be some local dialogue. People need to become engaged. People need to become informed in these issues, and then come back in the fall and start having a serious discussion about how it might go ahead. So tonight's paper for discussion is that first step, and we're giving you our initial planning position without knowing it's not the final position of council. It simply is our cut of it from a staff level. And we're providing key messages regarding the impacts of growth on this community. And we want to keep council informed on the consultations with the region and its own citizens, and we think this is a good way to do it. Part 2 of this, as I said earlier, will be the evaluation matrix that's applied to the growth scenarios to see which gets more weight in terms of what that outcome is. So knowing this will help us understand the part 2 and when we get to it in the fall. As I said, public consultation is important, evaluating the scenarios, selecting a preferred scenarios, and this will be something this council will get to recommend to the region. And then the region will undertake the revisions to the official plan to make the necessary changes based on however regional council approves or proceeds. I think that's it for that.
Thank you. I would like to express my appreciation at this time for the presentation that your staff, Jeff Abna, presented to the Community Leaders Roundtable recently, which was very well received, and they certainly understood the issues as were laid out by Mr. Abna in the presentation. He had a slideshow about the discussion paper.
Thank you, Mayor Burton.
And I was very impressed with the material. We have questions, and I'll start over here, and Councilor O'Meara, you get to go first.
Thank you, Your Worship. I read a few times in the report that it says the town of Oakville needs to be all in on growth. Can you just explain to me what?
I'm sorry, I was ruffling my paper. Can you repeat that, please?
Sorry, I said I read a few times in the discussion paper the term all in on growth. Can you just explain to me what staff means by all in on growth?
I believe the reference, and I have Mr. Abner here, if he's here. I'm going to ask him to come and answer that question. He'll be able to give you a better answer than I.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The intent of that statement was related to what Mr. Simeone was talking about in terms of, at the region, in terms of spreading out growth, just to exacerbate some of the problems we're already seeing in terms of traffic congestion and maybe carbon emissions and all the things that we've discussed in that paper. And the intent is that if we're going to build around transit, build communities that can provide people with an opportunity not only to choose to live without a car, but make them want to live without a car. We need people around our transit corridors and around those transit nodes to make that happen. If we don't have enough people, we could just end up building a dense community where people still want to use cars. We need the people to build the type of community that will have it so that people choose to live without a car, not just have the option to do so.
I understand the dichotomy between putting people in dense places. I guess my cautionary first read is why are we going all in on growth? Full stop. Not where it goes, but going all in on growth. That term is a little counterintuitive to what I hear on a day-to-day basis. So I would just maybe we can have a further discussion on that offline. But my second question relates to how do we, under this plan, how would we protect stable residential neighborhoods when we continue to have a tribunal that is saying intensification doesn't go where you want it to go, it goes where I think it goes? So by drawing a line around the box up here and saying no new greenfield, are we setting ourselves up to have encroachment into our stable residential neighborhoods because we're giving no other option when we go all in on growth?
Through Mayor Burton, so I think, number one, I think the best tool to protect the stability of neighborhoods is actually the livable Oakville plan at the local level in the urban structure. The region operates at a slightly higher level in that context. But I do believe the all-in and growth thing, if I could come back to that, in order to get the mix of use at the pace you need it to make the change, to move us off cars and all of those things and reduce emissions, you can't nibble away at it slowly. It has to happen in a way that makes sense and it's clear. There's signal to the private sector that this is something that's happening. Public money is being attracted to this development. Private money gets attracted to it. If you can't get anywhere in a transit system that has medium to low densities in the shortness of time, the time that we need to get that done. Mr. Abma made a great point. We were talking about this today, and he said, if you don't build the city right now, you can't fix it after in a very easy, meaningful way. So you can't take something that's a typical suburban Toronto neighborhood and turn it into a modern, vibrant, exciting place if you don't start out with that first step that looks like that. So I'm understanding the all-in and growth piece to meaning you need to be understanding growth is happening. We need to manage it in a proper way, but we need some of that growth to make those changes happen.
I appreciate that. And I mean, a lot of us who are in the weeds on these issues understand that. I guess where my disconnect is many people in this town believe they live in a town and they're not on a rush to go build a city. And there's a disconnect in terms of how we're going to communicate this conversation about how we rush to build a city when everybody in the little towns and roads and villages that cul-de-sacs that we talk to are horrified by that notion. And I'm not sure, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on how we bridge that gap, because I don't see any bridge being able to come to that gap at this point.
I believe.
Madam Commissioner.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I think there's a perfect bridge between protecting stable residential communities and moving forward with a plan that ensures that all the growth that we currently have assigned to us by the province, it's not that we've created this opportunity, they assign the growth to the region as a whole. And what we do understand from the regional work is that all of that population can be accommodated with the areas that we currently have designated. So we can accommodate all that population within the urban structure that this council has approved. And the premise of the urban structure from this council is that we're going to grow in the nodes and corridors. If we grow in those areas, we can support transit that supports those communities, those livable communities in those nodes and corridors. And at the same time, we've accommodated that growth, which means that our natural areas, as well as our stable residential areas, can stay in the same character they have. So I think the two of those things go hand in hand. If we allow the growth to continually spread out, we erode our ability to really support those transit corridors so that you can get the transit, reduce the emissions, provide for the cyclists. Those are the kinds of things that we need to be doing in terms of moving forward. So the two are hand in hand with each other.
Councillor Dudek.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. I guess one of my questions is, we have a Livable Oakville subcommittee, and I don't remember seeing this at the committee. Is that because of the timing aspect? Because it was a useful tool to sort of do a preliminary vetting of, what shall I say, larger documents that we're trying to wrestle with.
Through you, Mayor Burton. So yes, I agree with you. Livable Oakville is a great place. The timing of this has been poorly timed with respect to changes in the provincial government, and actually delayed the regional process until they understood the impacts of 108 PPS, all the stuff we're dealing with right now and trying to get a handle on. So their process kind of slowed down, and we needed to get them far enough along in their process so we could respond to a document that they actually had finally prepared, which took till very recently. And that's how we're here tonight.
Thank you, appreciate that. I guess on page 64, there's the second bullet down, it refers to affordable housing. And I guess this, for me, has become a real bugaboo, for lack of a better word, given the push from the provincial government about the Bill 108, more homes, more choices, and that this will result in more affordable housing. And we have no guarantee to the average taxpayer that it will result in affordable. I get this scenario, compact, get away from large single dwellings, but we don't have control over that. The developer or the market is the one who has the control over that. And we put all this effort into talking about affordable housing, but we can't really assure people we're going to produce that at the end of the road. So I guess I'm a little concerned when I see affordable housing showing up, and again, as I say, it's more to the item number 7. And that sort of goes into the other issue I have, and that's with, we talk about our Livable Oakville plan, we talk about the planning and all the consultation we've done such a great job on in order to craft our Livable Oakville plan to take us into the future. But again, coming back to the provincial legislation I see coming through, they don't have respect for our official plan. So I'm sort of thinking, are we trying to put more importance on our official plan when the province doesn't give us the same regard?
Through you, Mayor Burton. I still believe the official plan is an important tool in this community. It remains as such in my mind. There's always lessons to be learned as we move forward with new provincial policies, new LPAT decisions, and how we might fine-tune those documents. But I believe they're the right ones to serve the outcomes that this community wants to have. It's unfortunate sometimes decisions don't go the way we think they should, but we're working on that and we're learning from that on an ongoing basis.
Thank you.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much. We had, I think, a pretty good discussion about this concept of communicating the term all in, and maybe we need to rephrase the term all in, because I think that's perhaps a problematic term. And perhaps we need to communicate that that Oakville has to be prepared to strongly target growth, or something in that phraseology, I think would be a better way of communicating the issue of dealing with growth and how to manage the extra population that might be handed to us through the province to the region to us. That would be my feedback around that, because I think I agree with my colleague with respect to the concern that we might receive with respect to how intensification happens within our stable areas that we have historically defended every step of the way. I don't think that's going to change, but I do think we have the nodes and the corridors that we've targeted historically, and I think those are the places that we are considering targeting further, and that's the communication that we need to do.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mayor Burton. I think that's part of our reason tonight was to have exactly this type of discussion. I thank you for your comments.
Councillor Elgar.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the report. I read it a number of times. I guess I have a few questions to ask, and it's that, to make it simple. Like, do you agree that that currently the development charges do not cover the cost of growth?
Yes, through you, Mayor Burton.
Do staff know the potential impact that Bill 108 will have on the DCs at this point?
I do not believe staff have that full knowledge of that at this time.
We don't know at all, I guess, right now. Do you have any indication? Like right now, how much are we subsidizing growth for every $100 in DCs? What's it cost us? Is it $120, $130, and I cut an extra $20, $30? That's on the tax base?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor Burton, I don't have an answer to that question.
Okay.
Actually, if I could help here, we have reports from finance at the region and at the town that establish those numbers. My recollection is it's 7 million or so. The treasurer is actually here in the back of the room. My recollection is that in Oakville, it's 7 million. And I'm getting a nod from the treasurer. And I recollect we just recently had the same report at the region, and as I recall, it's 10 million.
See, my question is, we're making decisions here, and we have absolutely not considered the people that we represent as councillors, which are the taxpayers, which are paying the subsidization of the costs of the proposed growth that we have here. We all know that transit looks rear view mirror 10 years on the average, and we're trying to bump up transit, which is on the backs of the existing taxpayers. And I haven't heard that the province is going to kick in all the money to make the difference. And I'm trying to understand why we are, at this point, doing anything until we know the results of Bill 108 and the impact it will have on us as a municipality.
Well, Councillor,
It's a good question, and I'd like an answer.
Councillor, that's an answer that I think I'm in a better position to give. We're considering it because we unanimously voted at the region a few weeks ago, 2 or 3 meetings ago, to stop a full-speed process at the region to distribute the 180,000 people in a decision slated for September under the Integrated Growth Management Strategy. And it was our unanimous opinion, you were there, that there hadn't been enough public consultation with the local municipal residents. And so we called a halt to that process and referred the matter down to the 4 local councils so that this kind of consultation and the kind that happened with the Community Leaders Roundtable and the additional public consultation that we intend to conduct would have an opportunity to come back to us at this table, and then we would make a decision as to what we wanted to recommend to the region for Oakville and which of those 4 scenarios. I believe that the center of gravity of the feeling around the regional table is for one of the scenarios where the white space gets opened up.
Mayor Burton, I understand every bit of what you're saying, and I'm sure everybody does. What I'm saying, Mayor Burton, is the fact that part of this package going back to the region should have Bill 108 input, and that has to happen.
And it can only happen because we agreed to bring it down here so that we could do this kind of work.
Yeah, I'm sorry, there's some misunderstanding. I'm not saying we don't do the work. I'm saying we do the work. But we do the work with the information with Bill 108 so that we know, and we can go out and tell the taxpayer what it's going to cost to implement what's being proposed by saying, we want an all-in proposal here, which is all in for growth for Oakville. Yeah, like, all I'm wanting to do is give the dollar value. How much will the impact be on a taxpayer if we have to subsidize transit by a lot more, subsidize all the development by a lot more? These are real hard numbers, and the people that I represent, I don't have any of them calling me saying, I want to pay a lot more taxes and go with this plan. I just don't. Maybe you do, and that's good, but I
I
don't.
don't know how it's possible for, it sounds like we have a misunderstanding, and I don't know how we can misunderstand this. All of those things are appropriate inputs, and as a result of our unanimous decision to do this, we now have the canvas to paint all that on that canvas.
But we don't, and that's, I agree, but we don't have, we only have a partial paint job on this canvas because we have no idea what the costs are going to be with Bill 108 that the province is pushing down to us.
We have, we find ourselves in a process where we were, let's try to remember where we were. Where we were a few weeks ago was we were on our way to a decision before the final regulations of Bill 108 would be out.
Well, Mayor Burton, I hear
now-
what you're saying, but Gary Carr and I had a motion, which we would put forward, that there will be, unless we get the development charge to pay for the cost of growth, we're not going to grow, which is in our official plan at the region right now.
That's great, but meanwhile, the Integrated Growth Management Strategy study was going forward for a decision in September, where the regional council was going to vote how much white space to open up. This is an opportunity for Oakville to come to a community-wide decision on how much, if any, of the white space it wants to see opened up.
Well,
And all of those things, Bill 108, everything else, gets to be part of it. And none of that discussion was going to take place, except that we all voted, yourself included, to do this.
To send it back to municipality, and that's what I really still agree. Take it back to municipality, let the municipality run the numbers, which we only have information for headcount. We'd have $0 of what it's going to cost for this to 2041, right?
This is just a start.
It sure is. Like, and to me, it's premature, because I think you may find out that the public input may be quite different if development charges are going to drop, which I suspect they are, and the taxpayer is going to have to foot the bill, because we have no other way of doing it. Okay, you've heard what I've said. Obviously, we've got to really change our switching gears report from 2018, because we're looking to get to 3% with our local transit by 2021, and GO Transit is going to be 7%. But it's going to get way worse by 2026, because the GO Transit is going to go to 7%, which is, or 10% from 7%, and then 2031 go to 14%. Everybody's going to be driving the cars, the GO trains, and that's what we're moving with switching gears. So, like, we are so fundamentally premature on this going back to the region. Like, we're looking at one thing for zero greenfield, and that's fine. But we should just say all other factors should have to be considered before we do anything else.
And the factors you're raising would not have had the airing they're getting if we hadn't started this process.
Oh, I know the newsletter in the fall is going to be fantastic this time, so we'll get input. But I just think, I think we should refer it back until we have decisions on 108.
Well, what we said we would do unanimously was we would have public discussions. This is, and it's my position that we should have those discussions and we should raise all these issues.
But they're not in the report at all about, okay, thank you. Now you hit the point, which I wanted to get to. Nothing in this report says it's going to cost a taxpayer a lot more money.
And the staff said this is only a start of the consulting.
But there's nothing in here saying that the DCs will change or go up or down. And we all, I think if anybody's read Bill 108, we know which way they're going, and it's not in the taxpayer's favor. So this is, do you understand why I am so concerned about a report like this, which has so little information, and yet we're making decisions, and it's going to have one heck of an impact on the taxpayers?
We're not making a decision. First off, it's not a report, it's a discussion paper. Secondly, it's not the end, it's the beginning. And third, if we want to have discussion, we got to start. So
But we
I
haven't
think
given-
what you,
okay.
everything you want is in front of you here.
Okay, well,
And you,
Nothing in here says anything about cost.
you're not at the end, you're at the start.
Okay, but there should be something in there to say, we have absolutely no idea what it will cost the taxpayer going forward if this report ever is endorsed of this type, with zero greenfield. All I know is at the appropriate time, obviously, you're going straight forward. As long as we have a recorded vote, I know where I can go then on this.
Well,
But I would have
all we're
referred it
talking,
back until
all
Bill
we're talking
108.
about now is letting the public have a say.
Well, apparently, the public gets to say before the councilors even hear about it, because you've already presented to the people of the community leaders, and we didn't even get it. So, anyway, it's interesting. But I'll just ask for a recorded vote at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Giddings?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to see talk about valuing and maintaining existing character of our neighborhoods. I think it's an unfortunate use in terms of all in on growth. I look forward to the public consultation. Further to Councillor Elder's concerns, during that consultation, will we have Bill 108 and cost of growth as part of that, so our residents can have an idea and
Through you, Mayor Burton, it's my understanding that the next round of work, so this is work generated from the region that town has responded to, and that other report that I referred to at the beginning of my comments tonight, the evaluation criteria, will deal with matters of cost at a certain order of magnitude. We've seen some numbers, I believe it was about a year ago, the region's looking at things like big pipes and big roads, that type of numbering system related to the scenarios. They've done some preliminary work on that. I expect that that work will come from the regional work. This is a staff report from Oakville responding to a regional paper, right? So we'll see additional criteria for council to be commenting on as part two. So this was part one, where we're just introducing the scenarios, and part two will be the evaluation criteria that's applied to the scenarios. And depending on that, and presumably the cost will be in there, you'll be able to see what the difference is of 1 versus 4.
I understand, but there'll be consultation in Oakville
Yes,
for our
oh, yes.
residents.
We're going to come back, when they do their paper, we'll be working with them, so I think it's in October they're coming back. We intend to come here at the same time, given our schedules of agendas, so that we can show you their work and have this further follow-up discussion.
That's great, and I just want to be able to make sure that we'll include some of those numbers that we're currently behind on in terms of development charges. We don't know what's coming, but I'd like to let people know what that shortfall is currently. And the other thing, as the commissioner was talking about in terms of the permissions that are currently in place, the designations that are currently there, I'm sure people would be interested to see if we did nothing, what will the population grow by? Because we are going to have a certain number of units or population, given the permissions that are already in place, correct?
Yes, so we have, as I said, through you, Mayor Burton, so we've already planned the 2031, that's the 720 number, I got that right? 820 number, whatever, it's 180,000 less than a million, so it's 820. And let's say we get 30%, which is our historical share of that 180, whatever that comes to, 60,000 more people. So we only have to go from 2031 to 2041 in this exercise from an Oakville standpoint. You already have the permissions to meet the current growth plan, not the current growth plan.
I agree. I think it's important to show that gap between 2031 and a possible 2041 as part of the consultation.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hazat-Thiel.
So, not having been at the regional council meeting, I guess I have some clarifying questions based on all the valuable input of everyone. So, my understanding is you're going to come back with step 2, which tells us here's the evaluation criteria and how that it relates to each of the scenarios.
Correct. So through you, Mayor Burton, this report is to be received tonight, so it's not a recommendation report. We're just having the information shared. We'll have time to consider that and have further dialogue. And then step 2, we'll bring you the report as we did this on the evaluation criteria. And then you'll have the 2 parts to then make your own recommendations on how you think you should best proceed.
Okay, but so on September 9th, when we hear that, At what point, you know, I understand that the Mayor's Roundtable has had some discussion, but I've actually got an email requesting to articulate that the RAs would like to meet and have further discussions and understanding about Bill 108 and the growth strategy. And one of my concerns is there's missing data. And I'm sure that the data is going to come. So I have the utmost confidence that people are going to give us what we need. But I don't understand the drop dead date of when we have to make a decision. Is that October? Can we wait until those that have decided not to work for the next while to come back to work and let us, like, give us some information? Or, like,
Yes.
when do we have to have a decision on this?
So through you, Mayor Bird, it's my understanding this project wraps up in June, I believe, of 2020. This is the regional timeframe we're talking about. There's been several changes provincially, so that keeps pushing them back, which pushes our input back. The regional evaluation criteria, I think it's scheduled for October, not September. So if I said September, I meant the October date. And that, again, may be moved around by the practical understanding reality that the province hasn't finalized some of the important things that we need to understand. So there's some, I'm trying to give you my best estimate as to what the next steps are, but the exact timeframes may fluctuate by a month or two depending on provincial actions.
Okay, but what I'm understanding, and maybe just correct me if I'm wrong, we have some time to get the Bill 108 information, to get the DC information, to then actually have a more fulsome discussion with residents without, because I'd reiterate what I heard, maybe I heard what I wanted to hear, but this can create some fear that, you know, all in means I'm taking it all, or this means that we're going to affect a stable resident. Like, people won't understand until they hear the numbers and see, here's what you're already committed to. I just, that flow.
I understand.
Take it. I'm one of the rookies, okay? If I'm not going to get it as clearly, I can assure you others are not. So
Thank you.
I think if we have the time, we should be laying it out in a way that helps the average individual understand what are the implications here. Because I will say, I have a great deal of respect for the aspirational elements that are in the report. We may not be able to get there. We have to have a heated discussion, it appears, about it. But there's aspirational elements here that the next generation depends on us.
Through you, Mayor Burton, if I just may say that through the work that council has done with OPA 15, we've already got our 2049 figured out in our context of our current urban structure. If you already approved that map, that's as far as we need to go. And the all-in means just fill up your growth nodes. You don't need to move into the neighborhoods to meet the 2041 target. That's the good part of this one. I understand that there's issues that have to come with respect to financing and so on, and timing of infrastructure, but the capacity to grow exists in Oakville now. This is why staff have taken the view that you don't need to expand anything to meet the 2041 number in this community. You can do it in Midtown and all the other ones added up.
So if you could just replay what you just said in a very succinct way, people will get it a lot more clearly.
So we have, you want me to repeat? So you have, through you, Mayor Burton, we have capacity in our urban structure. What we did was worked with the region. We don't allocate it, but we knew we were going to 1 million. So through that work, we said, we looked at our growth nodes and we put a north part on Palermo and so on, made some adjustments.
Yep, I get that.
And now we have the capacity in those lines to meet that planning objective without additional lands needed to be added to this community for extra growth. So we don't have to go into the stable neighborhoods. There will be proposals, I'm sure, for some building here or there in a neighborhood, but that's happens in planning. So from an urban planning standpoint, this council has already approved that structure to 2041. It's subject to an appeal right now, but the information has now been endorsed by this community and sent to the region of Halton.
Okay. But perhaps I shouldn't repeat it, but when you read this, that's not really crystal clear
Fair
for
enough. Thank you.
people. And there is information that would help people be more fully informed and supportive one way or another, or So, but I do thank Jeff and Diane and all of the planning staff for the work that has been done to date, because I found it quite helpful to read.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lischina?
The light just came on. Thank you with that last statement. That was very helpful. So thank you, Councillor Haslett-Thiel, for getting it out of our Director of Planning. I appreciate that. I have a quick question about the map 5 built up areas that you had in your presentation. So this map showing the built up areas, so what you've indicated specifically to Oakville is that this map reflects our official plan. Yes.
Yes.
So in Oakville. So I'm not sure if you're able to answer this question, but does this built-up area map also reflect the official plans of the other 3 municipalities of the region?
It would be my understanding, yes.
It does.
This is the current Halton official plan map.
For each
So
one.
that would be reflective, yeah. Those are the built-up, through you, Mayor Burton, the built-up boundary is a term coming from the province about where a majority of growth should not be directed to designated greenfield areas, should occur south, we're inside the built boundary lines. On this map, it's the orange color, at least on my screen.
Right.
And then the purple is areas of expansion after you sort of filled up that first layer. Right now in Oakville, we've mostly filled up our orange lines, right? And that's why we're into our designated greenfield expansion. We have enough supply there between that and all our growth areas to meet our 2041.
I see. And just, I'm not sure if it's an opinion question, but Bill 108 with more homes, more choices, is it a backwards way of saying that let's open up those other areas?
You're hearing a presentation of Bill 108 later this evening, perhaps.
Thank you.
Leslie can provide you better information.
Maybe we could frame it this way. Bill 108 is going to affect us immediately. We already have planning in place that we were required to put that takes us out for the next 12 years. And it's in that period, at least the next 3 years, that we're going to be subjected to Bill 108. There's a possibility, we could hope, that the next provincial government might see the error of the Bill 108 way and change it. But for at least the next 3 years, we're going to have Bill 108 impacting the existing growth plan that's already laid down in black and white and English on our official plan that takes us out to 2031. That's Bill 108. This matter that is being done at the region and has been referred down to us is for after the next 12 years, from 2031 to 41. Who knows if Bill 108 will be alive then? You could hope that we'll all come to our senses before 2031. The other thing I need to clarify for people is the resolution passed at the region delays the region's work. It suspends the region's work on the integrated growth management strategy until all 4 local municipal councils return their recommendation. That was the nub, that was the whole point of the exercise, was to slow that train down. Okay? And a feature of that resolution was that we should be developing our own Oakville-created evaluation criteria to recommend to the region through public consultation at our local level, and not just be receiving stuff from the region. We should dare to speak up to the region. So that's what we're starting here. And all of these issues, it was our unanimous intention at the region to get all of these issues on the table so that the public can be better informed. You remember that we were looking for a way to inform the public who still largely are not aware of Bill 108. And I can't think of a better way than to hook it up to this major question about where is the population going to go after the next 12 years. So it matters now to care about 108. It was a theoretical concern before. And now I think we have the platform that we needed in order to take this question to the people. The next speaker or questioner is Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. I guess what it gets down to in reading this report, I have some reservations, and because these are very paradigm shift statements, because coming in the future, you know, getting out of the car, and you got to be living in a high intense area of population and so forth. And I understand that whole bit, but I really get concerned when we have statements like all in and saying no to growth will not save Oakville from effects of growth. And there was a statement, and this is where it gets with Council Allen with respect to the cost, how this is going to impact us financially, because you're saying in the report, as a result, Oakville residents will continue to bear a significant portion of the cost to maintain regional infrastructure, even if that infrastructure is not necessarily located in Oakville. Oakville residents would pay a growth but not get any of the benefits associated with that growth, such as the ability to deliver new community facilities. I don't understand that at all, and what that means.
Oh.
But there's implication of cost. You're putting it in there.
So through you, Your Worship, this is a tough one to walk. There's a regional tax levy, and Oakville represents a certain percentage of that dollar. If all the growth goes to another community in Halton, and the roads get bigger there, and the pipes get bigger there, and the fields get bigger there, the tax levy of this community will support that in spite of the fact that the growth doesn't occur here. That's the regional levy, not the town of Oakville levy. So this is a regional planning document, and you're allocating growth across the four communities of Oakville. And so the question is, in the scenarios, can Oakville handle its share within its current urban structure, which we've already blessed, right? We've already said that that's a good outcome for Oakville. And do we want to see expansion into the White Belt and other parts of Oakville at the cost of a regional taxpayer in the town of Oakville?
So the suggestion would be, you have 4 municipalities, correct?
Yes.
So if we say Oakville's staying within the realm of our structure with the nodes, and that's where our population growth within what we've got in our official plan, not outside the white areas. We're not encroaching in any white areas. Well, what happens with, say, Halton Hills wants to consider they need to expand? So how does that impact us down the line?
So through your Worship, so I don't know the planning situation in Halton Hills. I don't know if they're in their planning to 2041 like the town has done. We're officially not done that yet, but it's done through the urban structure work. I don't know about them. I don't know their land supply needs. But if they were to say that they needed to double their infrastructure from a regional perspective over the next 12 plus 10, so 22 years, that means they're going to get wider and spread out more and have more infrastructure that someone has to pay for. Because they might say, we want 100% of all that growth. We want all 180,000 move into some other place in the Halton region, which means you don't grow here, it grows there. It has to be accounted for, right? So that's part of the mix. So the cost here is an important issue as part of it.
The number that you might want to keep in mind is that 42 cents of every regional dollar comes out of Oakville. And that's what helps us be motivated to care about all these things. Councillor Long goes next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the context of what happened at the region, because I as well was not at the region. What I think is important, and I think this is important when it comes to accountability to the constituents that we represent, is to be able to try and understand and decipher what the growth means. We do have a very strong official plan with livable Oakville, but the rules may change with Bill 108, and I think it's important that that is overlaid so that people, the residents who have elected us to this council, need to be aware that the rules may be changing with 108, and then how this then impacts beyond 2031 to 2041. So I think the cost has been mentioned. I think the all-in, the context of what all-in is, I think that probably needs to be reworded, but it's to say that we already are well positioned for growth. We have our growth nodes, but we also have outside influences, and which potentially could have those growth nodes not be where the growth is going to be. And I think Bill 108 in that context needs to be explained to the residents with the unknown on the cost. And I think this is a great opportunity, and thank you for allowing it to be stopped at the region so it actually can come to the local level, so people can actually be aware of this and weigh in to give their opinion of how they want Oakville to be developed going forward as it was already outlined in the Livable Oakville.
Thank you, Councillor Longo. Yes, as I said, it was on a fast track to be finalized in September, so
So thank you.
what we've done is we've given the local residents of Oakville a chance to have a word where they weren't going to get. Councillor Sanju is next.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Thank you to all of my council colleagues for the comments thus far. I think they've recapped a majority of what my comments were. Just a quick clarification point. You mentioned expansion at the cost of the town for the other regional or the other municipalities to grow in the region. Can you just clarify for me, does that mean that the increase of the taxpayer rate would actually assist in that additional growth in the other areas as well?
If there's a certain amount of, through, we have the treasurer here, but I'll take a run at it from a planning director's standpoint. If one of the other communities grows and gets the majority, let's say 100,000 of those people, and all the needs that come with that, there'll be costs that come from the regional levy that filter through to the taxpayers in this community. And if you're not accepting any growth, that share is going to get stuck on a smaller group of people, which means their costs likely will go up. That's my simple understanding of that stuff. And I wanted to just respond to something.
So we're spreading the many dollars amongst many more people, is what you're saying?
Yes, and if you look at the map, which is on the screen, I mean, from a purely planning standpoint, I'm just talking urban planning standpoint, it's logical to grow this community of Halton from the bottom up and widening the roads as you go north. Not to say that growth shouldn't occur in all the other communities, but before you decide to expand them, potentially, you might want to maximize your current investments so that they're not becoming too expensive too quickly, instead of all over the map, right? There's a goal line at the bottom of this community, it makes sense to increase density. If Oakville doesn't receive any people, the people coming north, as I said earlier, will drive down Trafalgar and Bronte, creating traffic and CO2 emissions and unpleasant driving conditions without the growth, and somebody has to pay for it locally. So that's something to be mindful of when you're thinking about these things. I wanted to just make one other observation, if I could, Mayor Burton, Councillor Haslett-Thiel. The way the province, the reference to aspirational, the province has evolved now. The growth plan is the growth plan. Transit is a #1 priority. It's the #1 priority under 3.23, I think, of the growth plan. There's no going back here. Portions of North Oakville wouldn't get approved today under the existing 2019 plan. Planning doesn't get easier, it gets tougher. And we're moving in a tougher time frame. These decisions become extremely important as we go forward.
Mayor Burton, if I may, I still have one more question. Re the all-in growth piece, and I think I think you've heard from everybody, basically, about how we feel about that, the verbiage. I guess where my concern is and I can't remember what slide it was of yours that demonstrated where the nodes were in the town, but I think that generally speaking from
This one?
From a development perspective, you can see that a lot of the nodes, or a majority of growth, at least right now, is occurring in Ward 7. And I think that the concern that we have, particularly in the north, is we want to ensure that the nodal growth actually continues to happen and we're not having additional growth like within the subdivisions that are already there. We'll see on occasion zoning bylaw amendments or other types of applications that come in that requests, 4 to 5 to 10-story structures in the middle of $2 million homes. And from what I'm understanding, is that if we focus the growth in the nodal areas, then we wouldn't have that happen in the middle of a subdivision.
The middle of the subdivision 3, Mayor Burton, on this map is that taupey color, that yellow color. Those are the stable residential areas. It's council's policy under 1118A of Livable Oakville, this is North Oakville, but essentially we're not supposed to go in there. But along Dundas, you'll notice the purple color, and along Trafalgar, you will find that it's already council's policy to encourage higher density, and there is some stable neighborhoods right beside those. And that's where the line of the two-story houses versus taller buildings will occur. But this is where we growth. And North Oakville is to grow up in a phased manner. So the infrastructure and schools and things try to come in a timely fashion, so it goes from the bottom to the top.
Just along, I can't remember which of the councilors mentioned it before, but we don't have an indication right now from the province or the region regarding transit facilities, additional school usage, or any of that business. We're still in this very early pre-consult phase, correct?
Yes, the schooling and all of that we've dealt with on other agendas, but there's nothing that's changed is my understanding.
All right, thank you very much, Director.
So it's just let me, I hope not unnecessarily, remember this is all about after 12 years from now. And there's a lot of stuff already planned to happen for the next 12 years. And the stuff that's happening now got started in the late 80s. You know, these kinds of discussions happened way back then, and development has this incredibly long tail. And Councillor Adams is next.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the discussion we've had between everybody here. And when we go out for some community consultation or some further discussion or further report back, I know we've talked about trying to provide some kind of delta of what the cost of growth is, including the Oakville share of Halton region element of it. And I guess you have to make some assumptions around under what rules you play, and whether you get 90% of the soft costs or something else, but there you have it. Could we also provide some kind of further information about the delta in CO2 emissions from the different versions of this? I know I've seen, in the past, I've seen estimates of what the CO2 emission is from a denser community, an apartment versus, you know, a person housed in an apartment versus a person housed in a single detached home kind of thing. There are estimates out there that are available, and we could use those as starting points for discussion, for example. Could we provide the delta between the different versions of, say, the traffic congestion and the relative need to widen our roads to 8 lanes or something else? Could we provide a delta in terms of the loss of green space and the loss of biodiversity between the different versions? Are those some of the things that we would provide better information or harder quantitative information that somebody could react to?
Through to the councillor, your worship. Yes, the region has touched on those things. I've seen maps that show when roads might get larger in the next 22 years, but the costs haven't been really coming yet. That work is still being undertaken, but we've obviously noted that, and we can have further discussion with staff at the region to ensure that that's what their expectations of their process is. Because it's a great question.
Thank you. And then the last thing I'm trying to get my head wrapped around a little bit is, as I understood it, the response we're trying to give to the region is in part Oakville Council's view of what are the top things that we should be using to prioritize or rank the different models. And so, for example, is the top thing that we ought to be considering, for example, the CO2 emissions, the climate change impact of the choice that we make? Is that the #1 issue? Or is it the effect on our traffic congestion? Or is it the impact on our finances, or something else?
Through your worship, that work is still being undertaken by the regional staff. It got delayed, as I said, because of changes provincially. I do believe we get to respond at a staff level, or invited to comment on their draft stuff before they make a move to bring it forward. And we're certainly mindful of your comments.
So when we send something back to the region after consultation, will it be in the format of Oakville Town Council prefers version A, B, C, or D on the basis of this is the most important set of priorities?
That would be my understanding through you, Mayor Burton. So it'll be, you're not asked to do anything this evening. This is a received.
Yeah.
Second time you see it, it'll be received, and then we'll put it all together in one pile, and you can have your discussion, and you'll send a resolution, I'm assuming, to regional council with your position.
Thank you.
Staff will not be finalizing that stuff in the absence of council's consultation.
But staff will eventually be making a recommendation to us.
But you'll be seeing stuff coming from them before we actually finalize it, and then you can work yourself back up. We might be working on technical teams or groups like that just to get pulling information from our own planning documents and stuff like that, but no decisions are made at our level.
So what are the next, can you be really clear, what are the next steps after we receive this tonight?
So this is on hold until such time as the proper consultations. This is just here tonight to say that this is where the region's at.
Yep.
And for the benefit of the non-regional councillors who I'm sure been following it, give them an update. The second piece, I understand, is the draft evaluation conditions will be sent around at a staff level for us to look at, and we can have a discussion with them. If the time works, that would be an appropriate document, in my view, to bring to Livable Oakville Subcommittee. And then they will take that and prepare another document like you saw at the presentations at the region on the draft evaluation conditions. And then that is likely to be sent back to us for you guys to further discuss. And then make your recommendation.
So when you said the regional staff and the town staff and the HAP, I'll say, are having discussions, it's about the evaluation criteria?
That will be coming. I don't think it's evolved to that level yet because the work's been put on hold till later in the fall. It's my understanding their report's targeted for the regional meeting in, I want to say October. But it means that their work will be done at a draft level much sooner than that, given the cycle of an agenda, maybe 4 weeks before that, something of that nature.
So the evaluation criteria draft will be available, but they're still awaiting comment from the local municipality.
That's correct. There's nothing finalized there without your input.
For our first time, Councillor Knoll.
Just a quick question following up on what Councillor Adams was saying or asking about in terms of the next steps, the very clear next steps. At what point will, outside of tonight's meeting and whenever it's received or presented for receipt in the future, when will the public have an opportunity to chew on this?
Well,
when are we communicating to the public? When will they have an opportunity to provide feedback?
I'm just going to check my notes, Counselor, through you, Mayor Burton, to see if I have that information here. Otherwise, I'll look at Diane. Do you know? Diane might have better information as well. The timetable was moving quicker. It slowed down because of provincial changes, and now it's kind of stopped for this portion of it.
Well, I'm kind of concerned about what you said about the regions expecting to have this on the October agenda, because that'll be before.
It would be no
the
different
legislature
than
even
the
comes
report
back to
that,
work.
remember the report that Kurt Benson did at the region level? It'd be a draft staff report walking regional council through draft evaluation criteria, and then I believe that gets sent out. But
Mr. Planning Director, after his presentation, council unanimously decided that the local municipalities would provide advice on A, the scenarios, and B, the evaluation criteria, that we would develop our own opinions and send them up in the form of a resolution. The public consultation that we want to do here is for us to plan, and we've already started it. There's going to be, as I understand it, newsletters from members of council to the public to consult the public. There's going to be additional public meetings that residents associations will be having. And each of us, the goal of sending it down was to make it possible for each of us to meet with his or her constituents and enrich our understanding and theirs of the situation. But I wish we'd brought a copy of the resolution that we unanimously adopted. The work at the regions, it's not coming back until the local municipalities have reported. That is what the will of council at the region has said.
So we have whatever time we want to do whatever public consultation that we deem necessary, is what you're essentially saying.
That's what I wrote, that's what you passed.
Thank you.
And that's what we've got.
Thank you.
And that means that we've got as much time as we want. We could, to use that old phrase, get her right. So the next, we have two more. And the first is Councillor Elgar for a second time. The second is Councillor Duddick for a second time. And I wonder if I could trouble you for a motion to go past the hour. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. And that will only take us till 10:30, but we have a really big item on Bill 108 yet to look at. So we may not get there, or we may have to extend further. But anyway, Councillor Elgar.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Burton. Just, I think we need to clarify a few things here, because I think there could be a little misunderstanding. And I want you to tell me if the financial costs of Bill 108 impact the taxpayers only after 2031.
I'm through you, Mayor Burton. I do not know the answer to that question.
Sure you do.
Well,
Development charges will be, it'll be coming in and immediate this fall for going forward on how we do it.
Councillor, the ability to collect soft service development charges ends in December of next year.
Yes, thank you. And we know the Bill 108 will very well will change the soft services a lot more probably.
So wait, let's be clear. Bill 108 has the effect of ending our ability to collect DCs for soft services at the end of next year.
Thank you. So it has nothing to do with don't worry until 2031, right? We agree with that? This, you know, this is where Bill 108 and what we have tonight, those two things really tie together, and people have to understand it.
Bill 108 starts biting already.
Thank you. That's what residents want to know, not that don't worry until 2031. It's now that people have to wake up. And, you know, I just wonder, in the report on page 63, we talk about our inability to deliver new community facilities. Mark, if we don't grow, what new community facilities are we lacking?
Good, through you, Mayor Burton, good question. If we don't grow, there's a likelihood that you won't need new community facilities, but you need to renew community facilities that need capital investments. There will always be some level of growth that can occur by way of existing permissions and planning. So you would continue to see in already designated and zoned areas, sorry, knee problem here. You would see development occurring. There's people, right, we had discussions with the Ward 7 councillors recently, earlier this year, about wanting to see when and if new facilities can come there. So we looked at the hospital in the south end. There are new facilities that arrive in Oakville. There's renewal of capital infrastructure. Those types of things would happen.
But that's not, what you said here is we wouldn't, if we don't grow, we won't be able to deliver, but you're talking now 2031 to 2041. And if we have everything up to 2031, maybe we won't need anything in 2041 for new, but you really mean you don't mean what is written here then?
No, through you, Mayor Burton. So when I'm talking about growth from a planning standpoint, I'm talking about the ability to accommodate the population that's expected to be allocated to this community. Council then considers that type of development, because the population projections that we do for that inform the development charges bylaw. The development charges bylaw then sets the rates necessary, and the council approves a 10-year capital plan to achieve those outcomes. So that growth will occur. If we don't grow, perhaps the word should be, if we don't grow at the rate that accommodates the growth we're expecting, then council will have to come up with additional monies to pay for infrastructure because it doesn't have the growth it needs to pay for it.
But we all know development charges, everything's going to change by the end of next year. Now, the only other thing is that I know that the regional CAO is really happy that Bill 108 is there, because she realizes you can't really make any decision until we know the impact of Bill 108 at the region also. It's evident, and until we put the Bill 108 information in here going out to the residents, I think we're not doing a good service as councillors for our constituents, so they know what the impact could be going forward. And I thank you for that.
Mayor Burton, I just want to provide council, and particularly you, Councillor. Diane was kind enough to give me, I will be receiving a memo, this is from a staff member at the region, articulates regional council's direction to defer endorsement of the evaluation framework, the one we were talking about, not this one, to refine and develop 4 growth concepts that are outlined in the report that was held, that this staff report that we've prepared is dealing with, until local councils can recommend what evaluation criteria and weighting of the criteria best suit the planning needs of each local municipality. So I've just been handed this. So what we've heard earlier is in fact true. There will be an opportunity from the ground up to inform, and I understand that the cost of growth is going to be probably a high one on the list for Oakville Council.
Yeah, look on the bright side. One of the achievements tonight is you've established that a major criteria that needs to be mentioned is cost. Yeah, sure. And for a first time, we have Councillor Grant.
Thank you. So we've established that we're not going to use the phrase all in. Yes. We've also established the hard work that staff and council have done in defining the 6 growth nodes, for want of a better phrase, insulates us from any impacts of going all in, for want of a better phrase, which I'm sure we'll define later. But also, one thing I haven't really heard much about is the Vision 2057 work that we've done since, I think, the beginning of 2010. Is there anything that we can pull from that? Can we use pieces of that to guide us along the path?
May I ask, I'm not familiar with the Vision 21. I wasn't participating in it at the time. I'm aware of it, but I wouldn't have the knowledge you're looking for.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, the Transportation Master Plan, a lot of the work that we have done through 2057 are all inputs into our Livable Oakville plan, but also into our comments into the regional work. So it's all being used.
Okay, because I'd hate to see the fact that we've spent so much time on most of that planning process and having it kind of go the wayside because we're being pushed along this river of Bill 108. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Councillor Duddick for a second time.
Thank you. Through you, I'm glad that Councillor Knoll raised the concern I had in regards to the consultation process that we're going to adopt. And I guess I would respectfully suggest that we do similar to what we did with our official plan or any of those other broader documents, that we have an actual either town hall meeting or an opportunity where the various residents associations or residents get an opportunity to hear other than just in their immediate wards. And so I'm concerned that people get an opportunity to hear from other factions. They may not have an opportunity just by us disseminating information through newsletters or having our own individual meetings with people.
Through you, that sounds like an excellent idea, Councillor. You'll leave us with staff to take that back and formulate a plan?
And Councillor Hazzateel is next for a second time. Let's agree that this is a matter that needs the input of the local councillors who are not on the Livable Oakville Subcommittee. And that's why I think it's better that we're doing it as an entire council and committee of the whole. And let's not be referring off any piece of this to a committee that's only the regional councillors as we go forward. I mention that because earlier this evening there was some thought about sending something off to that committee. And I think what we've seen here is that this is a matter that every council voice is needed for. And I see widespread agreement. Councillor Hazzateel.
So I have a couple comments. First of all, it just strikes me that this is exactly why local planning matters. So I just wanted to say that because we see how hard We Love Oakville is out there working on behalf of the community, and this is at the essence of why local planning matters. So I know that that's not a question, it's only a comment. And Councillor Duddick, actually, I support her wise recommendation. I really strongly believe that it is important that consultation be done in a more collaborative, broader perspective. We can always have individual discussions and newsletters, but her suggestion is bang on.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there someone who'd like to move the receipt? Councillor Knoll, all those in favor?
Recorded vote.
To receive it?
Yep. I don't think it's ready.
Fine. There's no judgment on receiving, but anyway, we'll have a recorded vote. To vote to receive it, please rise to be named. Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Robertson, Councillor Duddick, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Hazleteel, Councillor Longo, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Grant, Councillor Adams, Councillor Lischina, Councillor Sanju, and Mayor Burton are recorded in favor. To be recorded in the negative, please rise to be named. And Councillor Elgar.
It was close.
Well, thank you for that. Council, the next item before us is the notice of, Councillor Giddings. Can I call the item?
The intention to designate, if my council colleagues don't have any questions, I'd be happy to move that. We had a rich discussion at Heritage Advisory Committee. I'd just like to refer to it as the Jordan Munn House, as opposed to 3020 Post Road. It's got a very rich history, and staff have been working with the developer since 2012 on that.
Thank you for the motion, Councillor. Any discussion?
Quick comment.
Councillor Knoll.
I just want to congratulate staff, and rarely congratulating a development company for actually coming up with this concept for securing this house. I know that my friends that are actively involved with the Trafalgar Township Historical Society are very excited to see this actually take place. This is like the Tuttle House that was done recently, or I guess not so recently, about 12, 13 years ago. And it's a great alternative to seeing another important piece of history being torn down. So thank you very much to everybody involved.
May I put the vote? All in favor? And any opposed? That's carried. We now come to a presentation on Bill 108, the football we kicked around so much earlier. And if you'll give your attention to our senior planner, Ms. Leslie Gilwoods, you will be edified as to what we know and what staff are recommending we should say by midnight to the province, because that is the deadline to comment. And council, you're going to need to go past 10:30. You might as well move that now. Will one of you do that? Councillor Haslett-Deal, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. We're ready.
I don't know if I am, but good evening, everybody. We're here again to talk about Bill 108 and the draft regulations the province has released. As a refresher, and for those of you new to Bill 108, it is a result of the province's interest in increasing housing supply in Ontario. On May 2nd, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing released a Housing Supply Action Plan, and on the same day, the related Bill 108, or the proposed More Homes, More Choice Act, received first reading in the legislature. Bill 108 modifies 13 pieces of provincial legislation, including the Development Charges Act, the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal Act, and the Ontario Heritage Act, as well as the Planning Act. Back on May 27th, when we first reported on Bill 108, it was our position that it was not very good news for Ontario municipalities. The town's comments were forwarded to the province, and despite the serious concerns raised by municipalities, on June 6th, the More Homes, More Choice Act became law, with only minor amendments from the legislation originally proposed. Most of the changes will come into force by proclamation of the Lieutenant Governor as the related regulations are finalized. On June 21st, the province posted 4 separate proposals seeking comments on the first batch of draft regulations related to the changes in Bill 108 and the changes it makes to the Development Charges Act, the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal Act, and the Planning Act. And when we say draft regulations or proposed regulations here tonight and in the staff report, what we really mean are a description of what regulations might look like, because that's all we've been provided by the province at this point. Details are provided in the report, but our general comments are that we don't have enough information to provide comprehensive comments. The commenting periods have been too short, particularly given summer council schedules, and it remains unclear how Bill 108 will deliver more affordable housing and ensure that growth will pay for growth to the extent possible, the maximum extent possible. So I'm going to go through the 4 proposals that have been posted so far, just briefly, because the details are in the report. First up, we have the proposed new regulation and regulation changes under the Planning Act, which address the topics listed here. The comments in the staff report are focused on the highlighted items. And for this one, because the comments are due tonight by 11:59 p.m., staff submitted a letter to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing last week, along with a copy of the staff report. So any additional comments from council can be included when we submit them, your resolution on the staff report. And the ministry was advised that that's how things would be rolling out, just given the time frame. The staff report concludes that with respect to this posting, appeals filed under the existing LPAT Act should be completed under the Bill 139 rules, regardless of whether a hearing has been scheduled. We also state that reduced decision timelines should only apply to complete applications that are submitted after Bill 108's Planning Act provisions come into force. They're proposing that the timeline be retroactive to royal assent on June 6th. We're also requesting that a new mandatory pre-consultation process be imposed. And further, that municipalities be permitted to deem a development application incomplete for qualitative reasons, like when a required study didn't provide sufficient technical analysis. Municipalities should be consulted before they are required by the minister to implement a community planning permit system. And additional residential units should only be permitted if it can be demonstrated they will not adversely impact human health or the environment. The second proposal is a proposed new regulation pertaining to the Community Benefits Authority under the Planning Act, which addresses the topics listed here. Again, our comments in the report are focused on the highlighted items. And for this one, we have until August 21st to submit our comments, so we're able to meet that time frame. And with respect to this posting, the staff report concludes that the alternative parkland rate should not be repealed until a CBC bylaw is passed. There's a bit of a time frame there where we're not able to apply that permit under the proposed regulation, or that parkland rate under the proposed regulations. Also, the requirements for the CBC strategy are needed together with more time to implement it. And that should run parallel with our DC studies and the expiry of an existing DC bylaw rate. The way it's proposed, they don't align, and for financial planning purposes, it would be most helpful if they would. Further, community benefit charge cap based on a maximum percentage of land value does not appear feasible if the goal is to maintain historic municipal revenue. The messaging to municipalities from the province is that we will be able to maintain historic revenue levels, even though the messaging to the public and from the home builders or the home building industry has been that there will be savings. So if we're maintaining revenue levels, we're not quite sure where the savings is coming from. The cost of land value appraisals should be paid by developers. There's provision in these regulations for subsequent appraisals where there's a dispute with the charge and it's not clear who would be bearing that cost. And finally, if a developer disputes a CBC and the subsequent appraisal of the value of the land is actually higher than the basis of the original CBC payment, an additional CBC payment should be required. The proposed regulation only contemplates a repayment to the developer, not a situation where the municipality might actually be owed more. The third proposal is about proposed changes to Ontario Regulation 8298 under the Development Charges Act, which describes proposed regulations and definitions related to the items listed here. Comments on this proposal are also due August 21st. And the staff report concludes that with respect to the DC Act regulation changes proposed, negative balances should be permitted to be carried forward into the new CBC calculation. The prescribed date for transition to the CBC should coincide with the expiry of an existing DC bylaw, so that's consistent with our previous comments. And further, that the proposed definitions do not provide certainty that the types of structures to be eligible for development charge deferral will retain that status over the deferral period, and that the DC rate freeze should be restricted to 6 months to a maximum of 1 year from the application date. Finally, the fourth posting is about proposed regulations under the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal Act, which describes proposed regulations related to transition matters and the revocation of the Planning Act appeals regulation. Because comments on this posting were due yesterday, staff submitted a letter to the Ministry of the Attorney General last week along with the staff report. And as I mentioned with the previous posting with comments due tonight, any additional comments from council may be included when we forward the resolution to the province. The staff report concludes that with respect to the proposed regulations described in this posting, appeals filed under the existing LPAT Act should be completed in accordance with the Bill 139 rules. Alternatively, the province should provide exemptions for certain appeals. And the removal of the timeline requirements for the LPAT to dispose of appeals and the return to lengthy de novo hearings will slow down the resolution of land use disputes. Not deliver more housing sooner. So just to recap the provincial process, we've had 2 deadlines pass or are about to pass tonight. So we've submitted comments to meet those deadlines, but any additional comments from you tonight will be forwarded along with your resolution. And that concludes my presentation. Because I got the short straw, I get to stand here and field your questions, but there's a whole team here to help me. So fire away.
It's my hope that council will be gentle. Councillor Elgar, let's start with you.
My comment, it's not a question. It's thank you very much for what you have done in this report. It's excellent, and I'd be pleased to move it. You've done an excellent job, staff, on this one.
Well, may I put the vote?
Yes. Let me go back to my seat.
I don't want to do anybody, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
They won't know or care.
Duly noted, thank you.
I would, you know, I tell you what, instead of using the time for a recorded vote, let me ask you if you'd rather hear from Councillor Robertson and Councillor Adams briefly as to what one of our local MPPs told them just the other day about Bill 108. Do either of you want to rise to that opportunity? Did Yes, so just answer the question, did the MPP's perception of Bill 108 have any similarity to this?
Absolutely none. In fact, she just, 2 minutes before this meeting, sent me a letter that probably would be really good for me to read at this point. It's not that long. And it says, "Thank you for meeting me last week to discuss issues of importance to Oakville. You referred to specific concerns regarding Bill 108, More Homes, More Choices, and the potential impact on community benefits charges," which at the time she did not understand. Our government released More Homes, More Choice, Ontario's Housing Supply Action Plan to increase the supply of housing in Ontario. We are not removing any community protections. Our government intends to consult with our municipal partners on the development of a community benefits charge that takes the politics out of planning. It is important that municipalities have the resources to support complete communities and give the public at large the opportunity to provide input into a strategy through public consultation. This does not happen in today's Section 37 negotiations. We look forward to working with the municipalities to develop a formula and protect vital municipal revenue streams to make community benefits more transparent and predictable. Growth must pay for growth, and it is important that municipalities have the resources to support complete communities. By working with municipalities, we will develop a cap that protects vital revenue streams. We are working to ensure there is more public input into community benefits through a development of a municipality-wide community benefit strategy. We are consulting on the best way to replace the current system of let's make a deal planning with a system that puts people and communities first. By working with municipalities, we will protect vital municipal revenue streams and make community benefits more transparent and predictable. The community benefits charge would be used to help fund growth-related capital costs for community benefits, such as libraries and daycare centers. And goes on to say that AMO basically is supporting this with a paragraph.
You're right, that's quite a different view. Councillor Adams, your turn.
Thank you, Your Worship, for raising the issue. I did meet with MPP Effie Triantafilopoulos earlier this morning, and not to make Councillor Robertson feel in any way slighted, I received the same form letter just this evening. The only difference is that mine said, "Dear Tom, thank you for meeting with me today to discuss." And I did spend an hour with her, and I spoke with her about the lack of consultation time, the issues associated with the development charge changes, the community benefit charge changes, the de novo hearings issue, the issues associated with LPAT, and amongst other issues associated with what we've seen here tonight. And I would agree with Councillor Robertson's assessment of her reaction and her level of information.
Well, I think I would like to just say that the letter that you guys received is a non-responsive response, I think is the best way to describe that. Councillor Elgar, you'd like to
Mayor
go?
Burton, after hearing this marvelous information, could we send our resolution that we just passed to her also? I think it'd be fitting to help her out, and maybe also to MPP Crawford also.
I'll look after it.
Thank you.
I need a mover for next item to be deferred, the proposed land exchange with the Gurdwara. Anybody? Councillor Sanju, all in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is deferred. We dealt with item number 9. We now come to the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee report. We need a motion to receive and, well, as printed in the agenda. Councillor Duddock, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. And now we need to go into camera for Councillor Elgar, who moves that we go into camera for the purpose of receiving, let me check with you that this is what you want, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and to consider matters of litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. And these are permitted uses of a closed session under the Municipal Act and our procedure bylaw. Does that capture what you wanted? And you're moving that. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. No recorded vote necessary.
Don't make fun of me too much, just a little bit.
Now, Madam Clerk, would you arrange the chamber for the necessary meeting period closed to the public? Ready?
Yep.
All right, council has met in a session closed to the public for the purpose of receiving advice from, that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, about litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and those are permitted uses of a closed session under the Municipal Act and the procedure bylaw of the town. In that session, council passed the following direction: that staff be authorized to proceed in the LPAT appeals of applications filed by Graydon Banning Limited and Martillac Estates in accordance with the report from the legal department dated July 26th and the confidential memo from the legal department dated August 2nd, to the satisfaction of the Commissioner of Community Development and town or solicitor or their designates. And now I need to ask a councillor for a motion to rise and report. Councillor Lischina, thank you. May I put the vote? All in favor? And that's carried. I rise and report that the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent item 1, confidential consent items C1 and C2, public hearing item 2, discussion items 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and advisory committee minutes, item 10, as noted by the clerk. Is there a mover and seconder for the report? Councillor Knoll and Councillor O'Meara, all in favor? Thank you. The report is adopted. We have some new business. And first I'll ask for, if there's any regular new business of emergency, congratulatory, or condolence nature. Thank you, everybody. there is an urgent matter for which Councillor Chisholm and Councillor Duddock would like to request a report, which is not a normal part of our Planning and Development Council procedure. So for their purpose, to get you to authorize this report, we need first to pass a motion to waive the procedure bylaw to permit the introduction. Councillor Lischina moves it, and we need a seconder now. Councillor Haslett-Deal, all those in favor? That looks like 2/3, and that carries. We now have a motion by a request moved by Councillor Chisholm and seconded by Councillor Duddock that staff be directed to report back to council the last quarter of 2019 on the lighting concerns of Tannery Park Waterworks Park Promenade and to provide recommendations in order to move forward with this project. May I put the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and the request is approved. Council, we now need a mover and seconder for consideration and reading of the bylaws. Who hasn't had a go? Who wants to go? Councillor Elgar wants to go. We need another second. Councillor Longo. This is the bylaws as listed in the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and the bylaws are adopted. Thank you very much for your time and attention and your many valuable contributions to the meeting tonight. It's been terrific working with you, and we are adjourned.